people are working on things regularly. That's why I said just carbon copy me on, if you guys are emailing and such. There's no, you guys can all call if there's a specific project, I thought. Because what I thought was there have been 2 or 3 different laws from different sources, and Joe was supposed to kind of combine the best parts of all of them into something.
He was supposed to give us 3 laws.
Parallel laws.
We've gone through this so many times, you guys.
I just it's you guys
at
be
the
carrying the
board
ball.
table, we have been gone through this many times.
Didn't get what we asked for.
No. And we clarified it last time because I remember Sally saying that we wanted to have 1 law, and we said no, we wanted 3 laws, 1 public hearing, just so that we were maybe 2 laws, 1 public hearing. But regardless, we were just doing it all at once. I mean, the whole point was that we went to this NICOM conference, got this new material, and we just figured we're doing it. Let's just do it. He's already working on this. This is not what we asked him for, which is what we said last week when it wasn't officially on our agenda. And I spoke with Joe, and it seemed like he never got our materials, but then he told me he did, and he couldn't open a file, and there was just a lot of in my opinion. And I don't know, I think you all know my opinion on the overall matter, but, specifically with this, I'm not sure what to do.
Well, I think that and I've said this forever, that really there has to be 1 communicator to the village attorney. Either I talk with Jason, and Jason says, okay, send it out, and I copy him so he knows what I'm sending to the attorney and the clerk knows. Or it's given to the clerk to give to the attorney. But I think part of our problem is that we're not communicating well, and he's hearing this from one person and this from another person. And I don't know about you guys, but I couldn't function that way.
I don't think that's it. I think I'm pretty sure he's received it. I mean,
we don't know that.
I mean, there was we all had hard copies. Stuart made hard copies for all of us.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
And I have mine.
Several meetings ago.
And as far as I know, Joe received that hard copy. And in addition to that, because I didn't have an electronic copy, I said, can we scan what we have here? And I believe, I don't know if you did that, but I talked to both you and Kurt about doing it. And Kurt also, when Joe called me and said, I can't find my electronic copy of this, I can't figure this out, I was in transit, so I couldn't actually get to my computer. But I spoke to Kurt and I said, it's in our packet. All of this information is in our agenda packet. Just forward that over to him and have him work with it. And then this is what we received.
But we also did set up that meeting every week. I didn't really hear back on
which is a time that I can't come to.
I didn't get any comments back. So, but so there's ways to track them down. I guess more importantly, what
on this law, the thing that I'm concerned about, it doesn't define the things that is most important to define for New Paltz, in my opinion. Where it talks about any natural gas and or petroleum support activities. That's the thing you want to define, because that's the thing that'll affect us if anything does. And in the big law that we sent to him, that was defined and included transportation and storage and blah blah.
Right.
So that's I think we should do a moratorium. We should do it soon. But I think that definition should be in there so that somebody can't squeak around this. It's not specifically in there.
So you want to define what extraction activities, petroleum
support activities.
All of A.
Number 3 on both of those includes the items that I think that are most likely to be here, if any of these.
So
I don't think they're going to come and put a well in your backyard, but I think that they might rent somebody's property and fill his pond up with toxic waste because he's paying them a fortune. They can do that, but it doesn't. So it says that, but it doesn't define what that is. Sure. And in the other law that was presented to him, I'm positive because it was a lot longer than this. It did. And the second point I would have is that the person who provided me with that is one of the experts in this state in Ithaca. He and his wife are really into this. And if we're serious about this, that attorney, which I mentioned the first time I wrote this up, would be more than willing to talk to our attorney about any of these things, which I think would be instructive and it wouldn't take a lot of time, and that would be helpful. So those are my only two comments. I'd like to do it tonight, but I don't think that protects us the way we should. So those are my comments.
But, Stuart, the question I have, and you used the word moratorium,
Right.
and it was my understanding we wanted a prohibition, a ban, not a moratorium. And
I mean,
so
this is moratorium and prohibition
we may be
is what this
confusing
says.
things because we're using different terminology.
Well, I
we-
sent him the law to read, and that's what it said. I mean, I haven't.
I don't
Other
think
than
he's
the one
gonna-
thing that I've told him was that I didn't think the information was accurate about we needed to put this all in one law. Necessarily, there's more than one theory, and we could have parallel laws, and I think that would be just fine. But other than that,
I don't think he's confused. I think he did what we had. The very first thing that we had wanted was a moratorium. And that's what he has produced for us, is the first thing we wanted. So it seems to me that he either didn't get or has ignored our second request.
Well, now I'm confused. I thought when you and Stuart came, and I don't care whether it's one law or two parallel laws, I thought the desire was to ban fracking.
Right.
Not a moratorium.
And but at that first meeting, what we discussed, and I think you might have been the one to say we should do the ban.
moratorium.
You said
Why we come up
moratorium.
with
I
the
want
law.
a ban. I'm not interested.
At that particular
The very
meeting,
first meeting that we talked about this at, we talked about a moratorium, and I don't know who was the one that said that this is what we should do, but that's what we talked about doing. And we said it because we wanted to do a moratorium right now so that we had time to do everything else, to do the law. And so this is the right now, so that we have time to do the law. Except that it's taken so long for the right now that we should have just done the law, which is what we all expected to get from our attorney, and what we got was what we had asked for right now 3 months ago.
Right, and I think along the process of seeing this,
Rosalind
over and
followed
over
that.
again, we had come to the decision that there's no point in doing the moratorium. I think Jason brought it up because in the time of doing the moratorium and doing the public hearings and all of that, it would have just been such a long process and cost so much money that why not just do the ban?
Right,
And
which is
that's
exactly
how we
where we're
got
at.
there. And this is and then now we're here with a moratorium.
Well, it's
Incredibly frustrating.
It is frustrating. I mean, it's not all on Joe either, though. I mean, we got this. I believe, Katie, we got this because this was going to last meeting.
We got this 1 week ago.
Yeah, a week and a half ago.
We got it last Monday.
Right.
Not this Monday, but the Monday before.
Yeah.
2 days before our board meeting. And we talked, and I wanted, and
I guess my point.
see, and I wanted to talk about this, but nobody allowed it to be on the agenda. So we didn't get to talk about it because we said, oh, well, let's not put it on the agenda in case we don't have the law, so we don't talk about it no matter what, and then nobody comes here expecting us to talk about it, and then we don't talk about it. But which is totally understandable, but then we didn't talk about it, so now we're talking about it.
Well, all I know is that I believe somebody should communicate to the attorney what it is that's wanted and stop confusing ourselves. And if it's 2 laws or 1 law, I don't care. Let's just get it done.
I was never confused, and I don't understand where the confusion happened. I'm not saying
with me.
Well, it does matter to me because
No, I said it didn't happen with me.
it didn't happen with you. Okay. Well, because it matters because obviously why it matters. But so I mean, I guess I don't know what all of you would like to do with this right now. I mean, I'm happy to have a
And we should get an actual.
No, it isn't. It isn't what I want. But I want something passed, and now is my problem. Like I want to pass something, and I just really am frustrated that this didn't happened sooner. And I don't feel like, I don't feel like I could have really spent any more time on this than I did. Like I tried to talk to everybody I could about it. And I know that Stuart went out of his way to get other attorneys other than our attorney to draft something.
Well, perhaps by the next meeting, however we're going to communicate with our attorney, we should have the moratorium, two things, a moratorium that defines the things that should be defined, and then maybe even have the draft of the final laws, because they've been available for months, it seems.
Well, we're going to have that by noon tomorrow.
And this.
Why don't you guys just write what you want? I mean, you got 4
But we did.
Well, we sent it.
We sent him a version that was basically ready for New Paltz. He only had to vet it. I don't understand.
And you spoke with him verbally.
I spoke with him
You wrote
verbally.
an email. You spoke with him verbally. So I don't think it's a mis.
I spoke with him verbally. When I spoke with him, all he was saying to me was, "I can't get these documents to you." And I said, "Well, and I was going away. I was gonna have internet. I was not gonna have phone." So I said, "Well, maybe you can send it to me. I can reformat it and send it back to you." And he never sent me anything. So and then I was away, and then this came on Monday, that's where we were last week. So I mean, and the thing is that he's not going to get us something by tomorrow at noon for next week, unless just the definition of petroleum support activities is what we add to this, and we pass this next week, or set a public hearing. Right, exactly. Set a public hearing on this next week.
Get the laws.
But I mean, it's just very, I mean, I think we're all equally frustrated, and it's becoming something that's on our plates for way too long.
Does Jason have a copy of what it is you want?
We all have copies because everybody received a
Yeah.
folder of a hard copy from
That's
Stuart
what you
at
gave
this
out.
meeting.
Okay.
And all I'd have to do is put the new
So
Paltz
Katie,
part in.
do you have a copy of the things that Stuart and Ariana gave out?
I did because I got it from Kurt, so it then went into a later packet at some point.
Will you ship them off to Joe?
Absolutely, I'll make a note right now.
CC the mayor on that as well.
Absolutely.
See, all of us.
Yeah, I guess
if that's all right with you.
Of course I will. I'll do whatever's requested.
And say this is due,
I'll forward it to you.
this is due in legal form for the board to discuss and set a hearing next Thursday. It's on the agenda then.
Well, if he gets it to us by tomorrow.
Our meeting's a day late.
So till Friday.
Okay. So it's due in legal form for the board to discuss on the Thursday
Our
night.
next meeting is next Thursday, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So, agenda items for this are due on Friday.
Tell him, make it noon so that you have time to get the package together without having to delay.
Okay.
And then we'll have it in the packet. We can discuss it and be done with it. This
Well,
is.
this is you. I mean, this is your guys' baby. What is that? Sally's idea of plan?
Everybody
Yes.
like
That's
it?
the quickest we can do.
I
at
want the
moment,
quickest.
So that's good.
Thank you, Sally.
You're welcome. No more
Are
lengthy chicken law discussion.
we done?
Let's get
Is
the
that it?
fracking out of the way.
I believe so.
Those in the plan?
There aren't any. I always build it in just in case
Oh,
Nancy
okay.
needs it, but
Okay.
Hmm? Yes, we do, don't we? All right. I'll move to go into executive session to discuss the appointment of particular individuals.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Hopefully, very, very brief.
Very super.
Guys, we're not gonna.
And so. Please, Roslyn, I'm ready to start the meeting.
Oh, I should be quiet?
Yes.
Everyone please heard.
Okay, the mayor's delayed. I'm going to start the meeting because we have out-of-town guests for our first presentation, and I don't want to hold them up, so may we please stand for the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any additions? think
should
quickly.
we put on the I guess that's executive
Yeah, I'm gonna
session,
change
so-
the order of the day,
Okay, that sounds
if that's okay.
I'm okay.
And what I'm gonna do is we're gonna have early March first on the water, and then we're gonna take a break and have an executive session to interview Linda for the planning board. And then we'll come out and finish everything else,
That's great.
okay?
Okay.
All right,
All in
sounds
favor?
good. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, public comment. Then Rosalind here.
So my name is Rosalind Cherry, and I understand that this evening we were going to be looking at a draft of an ordinance that was put together by the village lawyer to ban fracking in the village of New Paltz. And this was on the website, and I went over the document, and I'm in total shock. And the reason that I'm in total shock is that I believe in not reinventing the wheel, and floating around in many municipalities are two excellent documents. One is a community rights ordinance, that we have a right to clean air and to clean water and to good soil, therefore you can't frack, you can't have pipelines, you can't have the wastewater coming through town. You know, that our rights as, our rights to have these things. And the second one is zoning, which means that we do not allow heavy industry. And in fact, the zoning ordinances that have existed have already been taken to court, and they've been upheld in New York State. 2 zoning ordinances have been upheld that the people have a right to have no industry in where they live. And this document, I can't even understand it, and I don't know what we can do because I thought we were moving ahead, and now it looks like I just don't even understand this, and it's like none of the documents I've ever seen, and I don't know, you know, how we proceed, but this is what the lawyer, you know, came up with, and I know that Ariana has sent him copies of the zoning and the community rights ordinance, and he's even talked to other lawyers. I believe he talked to the lawyer who,
Ben Price.
Ben Price from the Community
Environmental Legal Defense
Legal
Fund.
Defense Fund. And anyway, so he's had long conversations with other people, and I just don't understand where this is coming from and how he's directed to do something that's more useful for us.
I'm gonna let Ariana and Stuart speak to this, because they of course proposed
Yes.
this idea. But there seems to be a major communication problem
Okay.
between the documents that were presented to the attorney to deliver a proposed law
Yes.
to this board, and
Mhm.
that is not this document.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
I'm not sure what the communication problem is because I thought we were pretty clear about what we wanted and what we were sending. But it seems like the documents hadn't been received. I don't. There was a lot of lack of clarity
Yes.
when I spoke with the attorney as to exactly what was going on with the documents.
Yes.
But it was really clear that this was not what we were looking for.
Right.
But he claims that this includes the 3 things that we wanted. Is what he claimed in an email.
Yes.
But I just don't really. I mean, I just don't see it. I don't. I'm not an attorney, so
Yeah.
I don't know all the specifics. But to me, I didn't feel like this was what we asked for. And I do wish the mayor was here because he is the main communicator, and we all discussed him being the main liaison between us and the attorney. And I would hope that he's had more conversations with him about it. So I would love to know what he had to
so
say.
when Jason
I can also say that what's happened, the first proposed local law was on probably submitted by you folks, was on the civil rights, environmental rights
Yes.
theory. Ariana and I, having gone to a NICOM program and hearing more details about things, suggested that we have at least the zoning ban theory, because that's the theory that's been upheld in the two cases you're speaking of.
Yes.
And speaking to the lawyer who, in Ithaca, who was the author, he and his wife are the author of those statutes, he provided a copy of a model that they believe is effective because the court cases are backing up. At least they haven't been taken on appeal yet, so until it gets through the Court of Appeals, we don't really know the answer. And that was provided to the attorney. So, and it didn't have to be one law glommed together, but they could be parallel laws. And then there was also the question, a third theory, which was about the damage to your roads theory, and maybe that's not that critical at this point. So I don't know why we don't have that. I think what's before us tonight in our packets is a proposed moratorium while we get the law we want in order. But I think there's questions about that as well, so we'll see where it goes.
Okay. And I think also that Governor Cuomo is basically going to decide if we're moving forward in New York State with fracking. And I think he just can't make the decision because both sides are quite strong. And I just hope that we can do this if, in the event they move ahead in New York State and they want to frack, that we have something on the books before they actually say that we're going to be fracking. So, you know, I think time is of the essence, and that, like I said, I just don't understand this, except what you're saying is a moratorium until we decide what we're going to do.
Yeah, I think there's some question about as far as extracting process in the village. It's probably not much of a chance that that's going to happen. On the other hand, if they're going to rent some property and dump a pool of toxic waste in the village, then we want to have a law on the books. So I think that's what's being looked at now. Why we don't have it here, I couldn't say it right now, but
Yeah.
Well, you know,
no one is trying to delay it, I know that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we don't have to worry so much about fracking, even though we sit on top of the Utica Shale. It's the related activities, like bringing the wastewater, you know,
Through the
village,
community, yeah.
having deep injection wells where they inject the fluid deep into the earth. So it's the activities that are related to fracking that is what we really want to ban also. So anyway, well, thank you.
Well, I just want to thank you all for starting without me. I just saw the time at 7:35 and ran up as fast as I could, so I apologize. But I don't know where we're at in the
We
conversation.
are in
Public comment.
Public
Oh,
comment.
okay, great.
and I've asked people to confine because David and Marge are here and they have to go home.
Perfect. So you guys actually don't need me on. I'll send you out.
You want to take a nap?
Yeah,
I'll continue.
I could use one. But what? So Rosalind, you spoke about fracking, and I know there's a couple people who need to get out of here early. Did you guys want? Is there any other public comment, or do you want to hear the presentation
Myra.
first? Oh, Myra, thank you.
Well, I did read what you have online insofar as a law for fracking. It's shorter than this document managed by our previous secretary. And what I want to get at is that I read that the DEC will recommend in their SGIS, their environmental impact statement, that that if we have a law in place, that if the governor decides, if the decision is to permit fracking, that they have to, the industry will have to consider our local law, whatever it will be. And I realized throughout New York State that the main emphasis is that we have a New York State ban, but that the local bans show a lot of dissent against, more so against than for, and it really helps in the decision making and in the process that the DEC would, through the governor, allow permitting, but the industry will have to honor each and every law. And I realize that the governor knows, as we know, that everything will go into litigation for or against, no matter what decision is made for or against. So I understand all that. So what I understand too is that your findings are encapsulated in a couple of paragraphs and purposes of your draft law, but that and then you're considering a moratorium for the purpose of more investigation and to be thorough. So I realize all the information is out there, and two, I am concerned that if it's not timely, the DEC can transport, can dump frac fluid waste, even store, do anything they want. That's how it's been happening in 20, 34 other states. Do anything they want because there's no law, and we would be part of that, part and parcel of providing that. We don't do something. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the questions that was asked was basically what is the miscommunication that's going on with our attorney?
Can we do that when we do fracking? Because
Sure.
we have David and Nancy.
I don't have a
here.
problem.
He's
I was just
sick.
thinking, okay,
Yeah,
but
we'll
just so
remember
that's
that.
yeah,
Thank
yeah. Because people would like to know, and I don't have a solid answer. So.
Yeah, just remember.
Yeah.
All right, David. Is it David, Nancy, Marjorie? You want to join us up at the table here? So we can. Yeah, please. This is the firm.
I'll sit up in front.
Months ago, we had hired Mr. Merzig's firm specifically to look at our water rates, since they have done business with other SUNY communities specifically around the state and have maybe a better model than we have. So now it's a couple months later, and you have a proposal for us, Mr. Merzig. You want to? Well, I guess the floor is yours.
Okay. We'll make this as short or as long as you have interest. Sometimes other municipalities I work for, they get me started and they say, okay, you can stop now, you know, we've got our money's worth, shut up.
That's what he brought me in last.
So, yeah, no. She's here for something completely different. One of the real reason that I'm here primarily is because the board was looking to raise your water and sewer rates in order to pay for upgrades that you know you're going to have to do in the near future. The specific reason I'm here is because of Sally. She made inquiries about other municipalities, especially other municipalities that have SUNY branches in them, and how, and also in municipalities that have very high percentages of not-for-profit entities, because one of the things that happens is that as a result of for example, the SUNY, all their property is tax exempt, which has a negative impact on your income generally. But they have a significant impact on user impact, water, sewer, fire, police, roads, all those things. And what we have done in a couple of other communities, including Delhi, that has a branch of State University, and in Oneonta, is that we looked at mechanisms that would have as many positive effects as possible, all wrapped up in one. And the two things that we found was that institutions tend to use high volumes of water. The reason that you have to have a significant infrastructure is because you have a large population, especially a large shifting population. So for a lot of the year you have lots of college students who tend to do things like take lots of showers and have swimming pools and do all sorts of other things that have to do with water. And we found that institutions have higher per unit usage of water per person than the average user. Mm-hmm. And so the question is, number one, how do you compensate the village for the high impact of infrastructure, mm-hmm. capital cost, capital maintenance, chemicals, all those sorts of things which have an impact on not only where you are, but where you have to be in the future. Mm-hmm. Every time somebody builds a building, every time somebody admits mm-hmm. Another student, you're going to have to increase your capacity, because you can't just say, okay, well, we need another 1 million gallons this week. It's something that takes a long time, long planning, long forward planning. So we said the other significant thing that we've always been looking for is conservation, because the greater the conservation, the less chemical use, the less impact on your system, the less capacity you need. Again, if you don't need a Cadillac, you can do it with a Chevrolet. If you don't need a Chevrolet and do a compact car, a hybrid, then you're doing good for everybody. The less water that goes to the system, the less effluent, the less waste you're treating. So how is it that we can address this in a way that both provides a benefit to the village and promotes conservation? In most industry, in most usage, the mechanism is if you buy retail, you pay retail. If you use wholesale, you pay wholesale. Which means if you're buying 100 widgets, you pay one price. If you're buying 1,000 or 10,000 widgets, you pay less per unit, which is fine in many circumstances. But in this circumstance, if what we want to do is promote conservation, and we want to produce less waste, then what you do is encourage the entities that are using the most per unit to conserve the most. In Oneonta, when we first implemented this, the day after it was implemented, there were flow restrictors on every single shower head in every single shower throughout the entire campus. So what this does is that this sets base rates and says the base rate is the lowest cost per unit, and everybody's charged that same. So if you're the single woman or older couple living in a house, you have a low rate per unit because actually your impact on the system is very low.
Mm-hmm.
And you have a lot of your taxpayers who are in that category. Now, as you begin going to entities that use higher and higher usages, then they should be, now they're not charged anymore for the first X thousand gallons. They're charged the same as everybody else. But as they begin using more and more and more, they're charged more per unit volume as they use larger and larger amounts. Because the larger and larger users are the one who can implement most efficiently the conservation mechanism, plus they're the ones who are putting the greatest impact on the system as a whole. Mm-hmm. So we call this conservation pricing, and that's what it is. Now, because of certain state and federal laws, you handle your water bills and your sewer bills separately. Now, here in the village, your sewer bills are based on your water usage. It makes sense. If it comes in one end, it goes out the other end. And that's how it's done in most communities. But what we need to do is break it down into two, and you currently bill that way. You bill for water and you bill for sewer usage. And so we've set up two different statutes. One that amends your water statute, the other that amends your sewer statute. There's some other technical things that we did. We sat down with the DPW folks and the people who install the meters to take them out and met with Nancy. And there are certain things that we do about billing with apartments and also independent readings. We're charging a little more for that. But basically what we're doing is we're implementing a mechanism that simply sets the rates. So if you use more, you pay more per unit. And again, you may not see it immediately, but one of the ameliorative effects is going to be that you're going to have the people who are impacting the most having the greatest incentive to put together conservation measures, which helps everybody. And that's basically it. Now we can go over the statutes if you want. We did take out the actual statute you have in place right now sets up various categories and says how you're going to allocate the uses by industries and institutions and users to set up your current bills. To be frank, that hasn't been done. So what we've done is we've cut out a lot of stuff that you haven't actually been using for the last 20 years, and just excised it. So you'll actually be doing what you say you're doing. And I don't know if you had a chance to look at it. A lot of it is information that you already have, but if you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
I want to say something about the actual.
This is Marge Mersey from Keo Consulting. I do the statutes. She does the actual number crunching, and has been working with Nancy to do that.
The numbers that you have are basically my recommendation. It will mean that every user will have a slight increase in their water and sewer rates. I know that you need to do that to meet your infrastructure needs. Mm-hmm. And then there's a 10% step. There's 6 10% steps. So the base rate is basically what your base rate is. I mean, it's 20% higher than your base rate now, but it's a very small increase for your users. It goes from 64 to 70.
Well, if you go by the quarter, it goes from 16 to 1875.
Right, it goes from 16 to
And your
1875.
gallon usage increases.
And the gallon increase. Then the next step up is 10% above that, and there's 6 steps, 10% above that. I have that. And it will basically achieve the increase revenue that you're trying to achieve in the short term. The other thing that my firm developed is a formula, an Excel formula, that will allow you to make changes very easily in the future.
Right.
So if you decide that you need to just raise the rates again, it'll be just easily, it self-calculates. If you need to, if you decide that your steps aren't wide enough, you can make that change as well. If you decide that your steps are too wide, you can ease them down to 8%, 7.5. So it gives you a lot of flexibility in your future. What Nancy and I have been talking about is let's implement these, let's get some additional revenue, let's find out if that's enough, and try out this step system, which is, I can tell you both, Dave and I were both instrumental in implementing this in both Oneonta and Delhi, and it made all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, the large users are paying for their use, and it's painful for the large users, but it's very, very good for the local residents, and it's really fairer. And as Dave said, we went from the city of Oneonta went from 3 million gallons a day to 2 million gallons a day usage, and that really helped us.
That's incredible,
especially this year when we've been in a drought situation.
Because you're rewarding the people for conservation.
Yeah.
Very often what you're doing is you're rewarding
making them pay
people for using more.
Right.
And we want to reward them for using less.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the concept,
Yeah.
and you'll have to among yourselves decide whether the numbers are what you want. Nancy and I both feel that this is what you need to achieve. It is an increase for everybody in town. There's no way around that. Everybody's bills are going to go up, but the big users are going to basically drive your ability to do the infrastructure needs that you have before you, and that's really the goal, is to allow you to have the revenue that you need without burdening the very, very small users.
I think one of the things you should be aware of is that we see the rates for both water and sewer use all across the state, and the comptroller also sets rates when they're providing funding for infrastructure, because they want to make sure that they're not giving low interest rates, which is then subsidizing lower water fees. So if you go to EFC or USDA for infrastructure funding in the future, it's important that you show them that in fact what you're doing is that you are actually charging appropriately for use that's consistent with what they believe is appropriate statewide. And right now your numbers are pretty close. They're actually lower than a lot of municipalities around the state. So your average user, your average public user, or private user, I should say, is actually paying a pretty decent, a pretty low rate relative to others in the state for what they're getting.
But on average, it'll allow you to also qualify for grants.
Yeah, that's the point that I'm making, is that they'll look at your net costs
and your EDUs.
Yeah.
And based on that, I believe that you'll be
in good shape when you come to finance it.
I did want to point out to the board that, excuse me, that the mayor and I sat in on this with our treasurer, who was very involved,
Right.
and has also been vetted by Blue and by our engineer. So we feel comfortable.
Oh, I
with
love
what
this.
is being recommended.
I so don't need to be convinced.
And I just think that while we talked about rates and all that, water is a finite resource, and we do have to protect it, and we have to reward those residents who are helping us protect it.
Absolutely.
The other thing is because of your relationship with DEP and New York City, I hate to use the term hostage, but
No, it's accurate.
He doesn't mind the term.
Yeah.
It's active.
If you've ever gone to one of the public hearings that DEP holds when they raise water rates
Oh,
to
yeah.
get the public input, it's so.
I know it's
It's
nothing, it's
awesome.
pro forma,
It's just-
they
it's
don't
a
even
joke.
listen.
No, nor should they,
I
nor
read-
would they.
I spent more than 25 years of my life dealing with New York City and
Should.
DEP from the Catskill watershed. I've represented municipalities in fact I was representing Prohibition, dealing with DEP using the reservoirs in the water. So I've been through a lot, and
Maybe calling you for.
we'll see.
But the aqueduct shutdowns that we're facing the next 5 to 10 years are really significant.
Well,
but only to a half a dozen communities up here. And
we'll talk off the record at some point on some of those issues. But the point is that this also gives you flexibility to respond to situations if you're addressing them. One of the things we've done, the mayor has been, as many other municipalities are doing, is trying to pull out the requirement to pass a new local law every time you want to make a change. Now, because of state and federal law, you have to do it with your sewer. That's built in. It came with the federal funding when they built the wastewater treatment plants in the 70s and 80s. But your water rates are going to be able to be passed by resolution. Just changing the rates are going to be able to be done with relative ease. And that's not to say that you're going to be changing them every 15 minutes. All I'm saying is another mechanism that we put in place that brings your statute up to speed and makes it easier in the future to make sure that your rates are in fact addressing the problem that we have.
How often do municipalities generally raise their rates?
Annually,
Really?
generally annually.
Huh.
And
Wow.
we haven't in how long, Nancy?
2005.
So this is
Yeah.
2005 is when we did the last
About
one.
time.
So we could do it at reorg technically.
Yeah.
And have a resolution passed every year.
Hoping
Reorg
to
if
have
we.
by the end of the year, have a list, have all the dollar figures split out of the code, and have a local law put before the board that would do just that, to reorg and have a schedule,
Yep.
so we all know where
That
to find
sounds
it every
good.
year.
I will jump in. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I was just going to, I think it has to be said for anybody who's watching this that water and sewer is supposed to stand on its own for the users that use it.
Absolutely.
And if you're not charging enough to keep up your system, then the money is going to come either by depleting your reserves, which is a very bad idea, or paying it from the general fund. And so people who aren't using are who are paying the taxes. So the fact that we're behind on this, it's important to have the users actually pay for what they're getting. Because you realize you're near the firehouse.
Yeah. It only goes up twice now. It used to go up like 10 times.
I have
Yes.
just another point which has nothing to do with it has to do with our old statute. And if we're going to change it, then I just have to put it on the table. The part that talks about if the bills remain unpaid a certain amount of time and so forth, you get a notice, and then when you turn the water back on, there's a fee. But I don't think that's how it was, because we had a complaint about that in our system, and I don't think that's how it was working. I think it was when you got the notice, you were charged the fee, and the water didn't even come off. So if this isn't the way we're going to do it in the future, then we ought to change it now. But if it is, that's fine. I'm just pointing that out as a possibility.
That's something you might want to talk to Blue.
Yeah, that's a technical question, internal technical question.
Right, I'm just saying while we're doing this, we ought to, if we want to change that, let's change it.
I don't know
If not,
if you
let's
have the
enforce it
answer
the
to
way
that
it's set.
question,
Well,
but
that's what the intention is,
Yeah.
to
Okay.
enforce it the way it is
Okay.
written.
the way. Well,
Okay,
that's.
and
I think
that's an in-house
that's exactly.
problem.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the question. Is
But that's not a question.
No,
for they
that's what I'm
want.
saying. It's not for them.
Yeah, the other
It's
thing
for us.
that I can tell you is that we did discuss it with DPW folks and with Blue, and they said
We've
that.
had
And
that discussion.
That very
we made some
discussion?
changes
Okay.
to conform with what they wanted.
Right.
So as it's written now is what we were instructed to do. So chat with them, and we can certainly
No,
talk
I don't have any fault with it either way, but if we're gonna do it differently than what it says and we're changing what it says, let's conform.
Well,
If this is what we want now, that's fine with
So
me.
everybody bought into it, as I said earlier. And our engineer, Jason, myself, Nancy,
It's all
and Dave, had a number of meetings about this.
Okay.
And I think we're.
And they're gonna follow this.
And it will be followed. But I do want
At
to
least that's the
say-
plan. That's the plan.
No, that's not the plan, that's what it's gonna be.
When you work with Sally.
But I just wanted to say publicly how great it is to have the treasurer that this village has. She is here tonight, and I really would like to recognize her. Nancy.
We are lucky.
Perfect.
And look how good she is.
I don't think I've ever seen you turn red, Nancy.
And I just want to say that I think one of the best things that happened to the village of New Paltz was my meeting the mayor of Delhi, who recommended you both. So
Thank you.
Well, we're very committed to college communities. You know, we live in one ourselves, and we've been working on this very subject for a very long time, and it's really a pleasure to bring it to you because it makes all the difference.
Yeah.
It's really so much fairer than a flat rate system. And it really works for a college community. It really, really does. So it makes us happy that we can give you something that has meant so much to our communities. And I think what we're providing for you, I feel very confident that what we're providing gives you a lot of flexibility, and that's what you've needed. So
Wonderful.
very happy.
Thank you so
very
much.
happy.
Yeah, thanks for coming down here too.
Yeah, Dave and Marge have been wonderful to work with. Wonderful.
Guys, there's a brief question about the numbers. So how do you come to these rates? And you don't have to give us the long. Just a little.
No, it's very easy.
Yeah.
Actually, it's very transparent.
Okay.
I'm going to grab my numbers so I can just tell you. 4,000 gallons will be your new quarterly minimum,
Okay.
and that's $18.75.
Okay.
And if you divide 4,000 gallons into $18.75, you come up with the first step amount.
Okay.
And that goes all the way up to 50,000 gallons. So the first 50,000 gallons are charged exactly the same as the minimum.
Okay.
It's just that it's based on 4,000 gallons a quarter. The 1875 is 4,000 gallons a quarter.
I think he's asking how to.
Like why? Yeah. Like why? Would
Why?
Why X number of cents as opposed to Y number
How
of
much
cents?
money you want to end up with.
And again, it's just my recommendation was that you raise your water rates for even the minimum.
Sure.
And I made a suggestion of what
He
that
wants to know
might
how
be.
much money he's going to make and how you calculated how much money you think they're going to make.
We've run spreadsheets for the treasurer's office to
Yeah,
show
Mr.
what you're going.
I was
We haven't been able to run them for the village users because that's electronic calculation, and the spreadsheets that they have are for the town and for SUNY.
Okay.
So we were able to give a projection based on these rates for SUNY and these rates for the town. And again, the town is 1.5 times
Sure.
what you're charging to the village residents.
Right.
And so what you see tonight is basically a mechanical calculation
Yeah.
and a 10% step. So the first 50,000 gallons are a certain rate.
Right.
The next 50,000 gallons are 10% more than that. and then the next 100,000 are 10% more than that, the next 200,000
And so on
are
for
more
eight
than that,
steps.
all the way up. And that's how the step
Right.
system works.
Right.
And I don't know if you, I mean, we have given the treasurer a projection based on the last quarter's billing as to what each customer would be charged.
Sure.
And you're welcome to look at it. I didn't bring that with me tonight because it's sort of an internal check that we've been looking at as we were doing the calculations to see how
Where it would end
how
up.
we're right, what we're
Right.
really talking about
Sure.
for actual customers.
You know, so
Yeah, I
you're
just
using-
wasn't aware if it was you were looking towards a certain goal and then let's find out what we need to meet that goal.
That's where we started.
Okay.
And my recommendations are based on meeting a 50% increase in your revenue the first year.
Okay. Great.
That's what I'm projecting as you're being able to do that. Whether that's going to be enough for your whatever infrastructure needs, we're going to have to see what actually comes in, because
Right.
again, every reading is slightly different. But that's what I'm projecting in a 50%
Sure.
increase in your revenue.
That's interesting. And I mean,
It'll be significantly more for State University College.
Sure.
So
Okay, well.
so that may come in higher. And the numbers that I've given Nancy, she probably can tell you what the actual increase in revenue is.
Unless they go and put low flow on tomorrow.
Yeah, well, if they do that, that's
Then
good
that's
for
even
them.
better
Yeah, that's
anyway.
all. That's good for you too.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
you're
Wait,
seeing
wait.
commercial drop down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
then the chemicals, then the cost that you pay for the water will go down.
Sure.
And the cost of expansion will go down. And then, again, so you have concomitant
Oh, it's-
conservation
But
benefits.
I could say
Yeah.
Yeah.
conservatively.
But one of the things that we try to do, and that we hope we've
achieve.
given you the power to do, is to now instead of having a gross mechanism, have a much more easily manipulated mechanism.
Yeah.
You can run what ifs. You can do spreadsheet projections and say, here's where we are, here's where we want to be, here's what makes sense. If you find an anomaly in one spot where you think that instead of 100,000 gallons, it should be 125,000 gallons, you'll have a mechanism already in place that will allow you to look at it and change it instead of saying, we're not really sure what's going to happen here, let's throw this at it and see what happens. But you're going to still need a couple of years, at least a bunch of quarters under your belt before you really know how the implementation's going to be.
That's great though.
Right, but the formula, it's an Excel formula, and it automatically calculates. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
So that you can run scenarios.
It's what's outlined in here.
It's
Or it's
on
It's a set, right?
the right. It's one
The
cell.
formula is a
just-
trademark formula.
Right.
Here Consulting Bank, and you can buy a license. No.
It doesn't mean I will use it again because it's really helpful. I actually paid someone to do the formula for me because I knew what I wanted to achieve, and all the other municipalities that I'm working with haven't gone that far yet.
Right.
So I said, hey, it'd be really great to be able to present you with something that's flexible like that, and that you could do that with computers now, right? So yeah, I'm
That's
very very pleased with what you've gotten, and I think it's better actually than any of our old municipalities because they just aren't that far along in the being able to use spreadsheets.
So we benefited.
Yeah, you
Hey.
did.
You get
Thanks all around.
Apple 6.0.
Alright. So you'll
something.
have a tiny bit water screen.
Exactly.
Anyway, we feel pleased. Nancy knows how to get in touch with us. If after tonight's meeting you say, I should have asked this question, I should have asked that question, please feel free to shoot questions to us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Very much, very appreciated.
And thank you for coming down.
Thanks so
I'm
much.
gonna
Very
move
welcome.
that we set a public hearing.
We
Yes,
did.
you do.
No, so let's get them out of here first before we jump the gun.
Oh.
Were there any other questions or about the water and the sewer and anything for David?
Yeah, I have some questions about the wording
Alright.
of this, but nothing.
Nothing that's
Yeah, they're not
Oh.
pressing for them.
No, that okay.
Yeah, I think it's for.
it's much more on our side of the process.
Oh, all right. Well, thanks for coming.
You're welcome. You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Very nice to see you all.
You're free to go.
Come again.
Maybe Nancy might have the answer for me.
Thanks very much.
Have a good night.
night, good
Thanks
night.
so much.
No, I think. Oh, she's sick. Okay, so there'll be one very brief question.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Sally wanted, well,
Brian has a question for Nancy.
Well,
but before then, we do have in our procedures that we generally don't make decisions at workshops, but we can if we feel like it, I guess. So is this fall under that? Because Sally was about to make a motion to set a
I'd
public
like to
hearing.
set the
So
public
I don't
hearing.
like
the other option, well, the other, when's our next meeting? Is it?
Next
not-
week,
is it
next
week?
Thursday. But if you
We need
if
to
you
do
set
it.
the meeting tonight, if you set the public hearing tonight, the earliest we can have it is October 10th.
And you have to, because we have to have
Okay,
it
I
by
didn't know.
November
You
15th.
want a November
That's
15th
why.
billing, don't
That's
you?
why
Right.
you
So
wanna
it's
do
an
it.
emergency.
Okay,
Yeah.
there is a time
If it's an
frame.
emergency,
Okay.
That's what I
I'm
wanted
willing
to
to
sort out.
do emergency things.
Thank you. Oh.
All right, but
I'll go with Brian on that.
before we remove anything,
Yes.
maybe you should ask your questions, Brian, because if it means a change to the law, we need that change before.
Sure.
we set the
Yeah.
hearing.
So it's just regarding C on this about the representatives of the DPW delivering the notice
Which one do you
personally.
want?
It's Article 1
Of sewer or water?
C for
Section.
water.
Are you done with the shut-off notices?
Yeah.
They actually do, they hand deliver all the
Well,
shut-off notices.
is that necessary? Is that, I mean,
Yes. Yes.
instead of putting certified personal mail, we need them at the door.
It's cheaper to have them go out and deliver the notices than to do a certified mail.
Really?
Absolutely. Certified mail is $5.75 a letter. And if
Yeah.
I have 100 customers, it's a lot cheaper to send DPW out there that can do probably 100 customers within a few hours.
In a few hours. So it probably works out to about the same, because if they're getting paid 25, 30 an
There's ways that
hour.
they're readily envelopes out and,
Yeah,
no,
that's
it's-
true.
and if they see DPW coming, they tend to pay.
Really?
So, yeah.
Huh. Okay. Alright, so that was that, and I think
We don't open
that's.
it against the wall.
I noticed that in 20713, it talks about the village clerk treasurer.
Yeah, he was supposed to change that to treasurer, we can make that change.
We can make, yeah, we can make
It was
that
supposed to
change.
be all treasurer.
Right,
We
that's,
probably just missed.
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, there's a couple instances in that paragraph, and I don't know if it's anywhere else in this, but we might wanna.
Actually, do you have the right one? Because I
No,
thought-
he doesn't.
Yeah, you know what? Actually,
Is there a new one?
there, I'm looking at this email of the final,
This is the
and
final one, which
Yeah.
you should have got.
See,
Okay,
I thought I had
Because
corrected
he
Right.
changed
Well,
all
maybe-
that.
It's the date stamped one.
There you go.
Yeah, this is in my
Yeah, he
packet
changed
today.
it all,
Okay,
like all of them.
okay, great.
yeah, because I'm looking at it and it is
Later on?
different.
Alright.
Yeah, it is corrected.
Okay, good. And
Good catch anyway.
Thanks. And the other thing is about 20716A, about anyone receiving water in the village needs to be annexed into the village. Am I?
Yeah, that is for water or sewer.
Okay.
The law, we can't extend, this was again, I think in 05 when we changed
Right.
the rates. It was because the village was facing a regular stream of individuals wanting to hook up to the village water or sewer.
Right.
And with limited capacity and running out of sewer, it basically meant we were being nickel and dimed, and we just had to accept them.
Right.
So when we raised the rates for village users, we also put in the law that said, basically, if you want to plug into the village municipal water system, you have to join the village, so that the village planning board had land use authority and zoning control over the density and the use of where those the village owned resources went.
Sure.
So rather than have it be a case by case basis and then, the risk of playing favorites and doing this at the other, it's, this is what, this is one of the reasons you have a village.
Right.
And so we're gonna do,
Right. And that's
Gonna
like
do that.
one of the big things a lot of.
yeah, and it's people have done it, I think a couple of times, this was fully different than that, because the water gives you more density, and our planning board is used to dealing with dense development, and it makes more sense to have it, the land use tied to the water and sewer.
So then how do we have town users who are getting charged?
It predates the law, because people have been connecting for 100 years on and off. The borders and the connection, that's the whole problem, is that, so for example, it becomes an administrative problem because, basically the village ends at about Joe Allen Road, but from there to the thruway, basically all water and sewer owned by the people of the village.
Huh.
But the mains are maintained by a town water department, and the billing then goes to the town, and there's a surcharge tacked on there, and on top of it, we still,
150%.
well, that was us, because it's a fiduciary thing. But no, the town on top of that tax on administrative fees,
Wow.
because we build all the district users are billed by the village directly. We build the town of New Paltz for all the districts,
Right.
people in district, and then the town turns around and then bills all these people individually and tax on a charge. We also have 300, no, a couple out-of-district users. There's a handful of individual homes. They're not in the village, but we bill directly and not the town.
For sewer.
For sewer, yeah.
There's very
I think there's some like up by Sunset Ridge. I think there's some in the end of Prospect, north of
at the way
River
of
Boys.
At the other
Yeah,
end.
the far across the River Boys. So anyway, that's long-winded answer to a simple
No,
question.
that's good. That's very informative. So
I think I got it.
what's one of your consolidation things then there, isn't it? Sounds like. Okay, so I'm good. Yeah, those are mine.
Well, I guess any other questions for Nancy, so she can go home and not be sick here?
Oh, she wants to hear us set the public hearing.
Oh, is that okay?
Yeah. I'll move to set the public hearing
Second.
for next week.
No, we need more time to set, but we can set it for the 10th.
October 10th. is what
Yes.
we need to do.
Is that our first October meeting?
That's our first October
Okay.
meeting.
Does that do it?
It should, because you
Okay.
just need to get it filed in 30 days to
Okay.
file.
I'll move it.
You should have a resolution
Second.
in front of you that you gave us for second.
Yeah. Any discussion? All in favor?
I
Do you want the resolution acted on in support of calling for the hearing? It wouldn't have to.
No, I don't, but
No.
normally you just have it.
Okay.
And just,
yeah. It's a pretty straightforward resolution.
So let's go and interview Linda for a few minutes. Is it, as long as you're okay with that, Kathy? You mind hanging out right here? I move to go into executive session to interview potential applicants or appointed officials.
Second.
All in favor? Versions of this revision.
Pardon me, I just need,
Yeah?
I'm so sorry, I just need to know who voted to, who,
Oh, I make the motion, Sally and Ariana seconded,
I second it.
and then it was unanimous.
We can both second.
thank
I'm
you.
actually not sure that's true. Can't you, multiple people second a motion?
Oh no, I don't know, but I can find out.
Do you want this back?
Yeah.
So, in the packets, I have, I emailed the first draft of this about 2 months ago to all the board. I got back comments from Stuart and from Sally. This is the 5th draft of the law, and I did take the time because we didn't change everything. So the highlighted version are the parts of the kind of the new. It's not exact necessarily, but it's the new concepts. But if you have questions, you can always compare it to the code book.
Now, I'm confused because you said the highlighted parts were the new part,
Yeah.
but I think the highlighted parts are the old part. This one. They highlighted this place and all that.
There are no definitions. Those are all new definitions.
That's all new definitions.
There's the whereas is obviously. I mean, for example, in the whereas, some of them quote the existing code, but you know. But I don't think anything is defined, and when we get to the actual text of the procedures.
Well, this is the same as the old. Oh no, I know what I did. Okay, never mind.
Just for anyone who is watching this over the next week or so, what this law is myself, Kathy Munoz, the building inspector, Kurt Lavala, the director of planning, and Joe Ariel, the attorney, have been rewriting the process by which we inspect rental properties, and then all the things that flow from that, from the timing to the fines to the definitions to everything. So this is an update or revision, and I guess with that, I don't know where to start, other than just maybe open up for questions or comments.
I did
Or...
respond. I did send everybody.
Oh yes, and we got some comments from the people who helped write it.
I was kind of hoping you would go through some of the stuff and
Sure.
deliver like your thought process.
Yeah, I would love.
You want me to just
I mean,
give you the overview?
I would love
Yeah.
a just complete go through. I guess just
Alright.
like.
Yeah, I'll just try to give you a summary.
Because I tried to look at this based on highlighted parts and look at our current code and compare it, and the highlighted versus non-highlighted, it looked like it was all just completely different.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
I was like, this isn't really matching up at all.
There are some sections that were deleted that are not replicated. Things that were, for example, there was a Board of Housing Standards that had been on the code book for 20, 30 years and had never really existed in real life. So we took out the fluff, the
right.
fat.
I'm not even talking about
Okay.
things like that.
So, but I just did want to make that point. So let me see the highlighted one. The gist of it is this, and Kathy, maybe you can come up. Actually, why don't you come up to the table, Kathy? Because the gist of this was one of the results of the conversation I was having when Kurt was hired. Because most of the past year, with all of the clerks coming and going, a lot of my
sit on the end
time has been. A lot of my time has been with the clerk's office.
No, there's a blue chair right for you up there.
No, I'll sit right here, I'm fine.
Okay.
You can sit, yeah, sit right there. All right, so this and some other things that are probably going to be coming down the pike are a result of working a lot with Kurt as when he first came in, and basically having to have the conversations about, all right, well, Kathy, break it down step by step. What is this? What do we do here?
Right.
What do we do there? So just getting Kurt oriented and finding ways that, since we've never even had a department head that wasn't a building inspector, it's been a little dance, a transition, trying to get things set. So in those conversations, specifically in the walking through the how do we go from hearing about a code violation to getting it resolved? What's the step? What's the time frame? What's this? And when Kathy spun it out, it can be 8, 9 months, a year, 10, not 10 years, but
no, don't tell me.
no, not 10 years, but a year. I think 9 months, 10 months. But Kathy, I guess maybe you could walk us through. That might be a good spot in a second. Hold on, actually, hold the thought. So the impetus for this was to rationalize our housing standards that we have, get rid of the stuff we're not using, and create a more streamlined process for both identifying rentals and for getting them inspected.
Right.
So one of the things, for example, if you go to, I'll just skip the definitions and all that, but at the bottom of page 2, or 129-7, there's a couple of kind of major concepts and then a couple of minor changes. So this is one of the major ones. Right now, in the village code, we define, back up a step. The village didn't inspect rentals until late 90s, mid-90s? Late 90s. So what we have now is what was devised by Mayor Nyquist and Allison Murray at the time and whoever else was involved in the process.
The new pulse has definitely changed.
It's been a 15-year experiment, and
Yes.
we've identified some things that don't work as well as they should. So one of those things is how we define a rental property. And right now it's defined as basically the equivalent of it has to be non-owner occupied. Which leads to interesting little questions like, what about a duplex?
Right.
Do we inspect that or not? Or
Two-family house.
if the homeowner, right, or a two-family house. So in trying to find the most common denominator definition of what a rental is, we came up with any property used either in whole or part, I'm not going to quote, any housing exchanged for money or barter is a rental. So basically, if you don't own it and you're paying someone something in some form, the village has a responsibility to make sure that your housing standards are up to code. In a way we don't, like for example, we're not going to go right into your house
I
because
have
it's
a
your
question
property.
about the bartering. What about like an au pair?
I don't know.
Au pair,
We never thought about that. A nanny?
A what?
Something like a living?
An au pair. Like if I were, living with a family as part of their family with a room in that house and not paying any rent, but watching the children of that family, but I'm very much a part of that family, how does that fit in?
I think you'd be inspected.
Your barter.
You're bartering your labor for housing.
Well, if there's not a rental agreement,
Yeah,
then
what if
how would
there's
you
no...
determine?
Yeah.
Well, that was one of my concerns when I did my comments, because I broke it down. And I agreed with the concept because I'm very cognizant of fire safety,
Sure.
all right, and codes.
Right.
And I said to Jason, I said, I totally understand where you're going with this. The difficulty I would have is finding them, right? And he agreed, how you find them.
We have a problem now.
Yeah,
So
we do. And, and getting a process in place where we and that's a legal thing,
Right.
that we would have to work on.
Okay.
But I think the concept is important because we do have a number of people that rent out a number of rooms, and these rooms could not have smoke detectors, could not have proper egress, could not have windows. I mean, I've been in these type of situations.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
you need windows to get out,
That would be pretty
So
I think we definitely need to be inspecting these properties. I guess the question, what if I'm an au pair, comes back to more of what Brian's saying of how do we know that I'm living in that house as an au pair.
That was one of the things that Jason and I said. I said, I totally agree with you. It's just finding them, finding out how do we find out where they are, and that's something that we may need to work on. I can tell you through my experience in the building department, if you have a lot, your neighbors tell you just about everything you need to know. And if there is a problem, the fire department calls you in, and I found things that way too. But there are a majority of people because they supplement their income, and I'm not saying that that's wrong.
Right.
I just want to make sure it's safe.
Right.
You know?
So I mean, really, at the end of the day, if there is no rental agreement, whether it's a barter or whether you're just staying in someone's basement without a rental agreement, we wouldn't know either way. I mean, no matter what happens.
Well, we
just
may not know.
No, but you sure could find him if you found out.
But here's the thing too, is that we're looking at, we should probably be careful with scale, because, I mean, the au pair thing, that kind of situation I imagine is rarer, maybe not,
Well,
obviously rarer than apartments.
She later used another.
Let me finish my comment, let me finish my sentence.
I think she took care of it, Jason.
Okay, well, that wasn't, but the condition of the housing for au pairs would still be of concern, so we don't want au pair living in a closet, I think was the thinking. But if it's getting in, it's, I think it basically we're relying somewhat on the neighbors, because I remember one instance, I think that's what I had in mind mostly for this, was there was one house in particular that had 8 residents, and the landlord had his mail sent there and claimed it as his residence, and would not let us in to inspect it.
Correct.
So running basically a tenement.
Right.
And we know that it's happening, but our hands are tied because our code says that if the owner lives there, we can't go in.
Right.
So now, if the owner lives there, but we know there's tenants, if there's tenants, provable tenants or other residents, non-family, we can inspect.
I mean, I understand this. I'm not against it. I'm asking the question because I want to know. I mean, this is one of the things. This is one of the things I brought up because I know people who are living in these situations with owner-occupied residences that are in bad situations.
But you brought up something else which changed the whole scheme from your first question. Your first question was you get your room for free in trade for.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you said, but if I'm an au pair, that's a whole different situation. Because you're bartering in the first, and the other you're a hired hand of the family. An au pair, by definition, is like a live-in maid, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that was my point.
Which I think would still fall under the inspection definition.
It falls into, you're perfectly
Yeah.
fine, because if I'm trading a room, I'm a college
In
student,
exchange for
I get
services,
a free room,
right?
but I occasionally have to watch the kids for my payment. That's very different than an au pair.
Right. And actually, there's the other thing, the rental agreement may be irrelevant, because if I remember it, even if you don't have a signed lease, you still have a lease, a month to month, like there's still not unspoken, but there's rules of how, landlords and tenants, without a written lease.
So if there's no lease, there are still regulations
Yeah.
to abide by, like, renters' rights, I guess, would be some of those things that
Tenants'
fall
rights,
under the tenants' rights.
A landlord can't come in with a 24 hours written notice, unless for emergencies, the eviction.
Expectation of privacy.
Yeah, expectation of, he can't, once it's past the first of the month, they can't kick you out until the first of the next month. So, there is.
And there are legal steps that they have to take even in order to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, so the tenants are protected through the Attorney General's office and the tenants' rights.
Sure.
And we try to incorporate those into our, like, if we get complaints, we try to incorporate that, and we do send a lot of people to the Attorney General's if it's beyond our scope.
Sure.
And then we do what we can on a local level, and then they pursue it at that level.
Sorry for interrupting.
No,
That's
That's the whole point of this. Is to find, I want to see if we forgot something or phrased something so that it's not going to work or would have a bad impact, and let's find them now. But that I think is the only real change in the fact that we require inspections. 129.8.
Whoa.
Oh wait, did I skip something?
Yeah, like everything.
Or did I have the pages out of order?
Hold on.
No, 129.7. And I was moving down to 129.8 on the next page.
On the code, because in the code, 129.7 is the legislative intent.
Yeah, all right.
currently.
Let me
And
Sorry,
here, 127 is what is 129.8
Right.
in the code currently.
If you look under part of the boilerplate, if you look under Part B, this Section 1, Sections Amended, it explains that this is actually eliminating that chapter altogether, effectively, even though it keeps a good chunk of it.
If I look in where?
Oh, on the local law I wrote. Yeah,
Yeah.
right under Part B, Section 1, Sections Amended. I didn't do the cross out because it's just too complicated, because we had things in different parts of the code.
Oh, in
So
section 1, sections amended.
yeah, so it's sections, it's parts of Chapter 129, Articles 2 and 5. Yeah, and so because it's reorganized, and it's better to look at the code, and I can.
This
I
is
can
part
find
of what
citations.
was confusing to me in terms of
That-
the
yeah, I forgot
highlighted
about
portions
Yeah.
and what was removed, because it just, I
The
don't know, it
numbers
just does
off.
not. Yeah, the
Numbers
numbers are off, but it doesn't. But even though the numbers are off, I don't know, we have A, B, C, and D in 129.7, and I don't see any of those in our current code
What do you mean? Well, this
under
is
any
not,
part of it.
you can't compare
All right.
this
Well,
to the.
why I'm comparing it is because what I was given was something that said that the highlighted parts are here. This is how it was explained: the current local law with the proposed changes to the local law highlighted. So when I tried to compare the two, that wasn't the case at all. Which is why I wanted to go through it more thoroughly so that I understood your thought process behind all of this, because I couldn't compare it and follow it at all.
I mean, he's added a lot, he's deleted a lot, and you just sort of have to look at each section to be able to know what's been added.
And a lot of this was here. A lot of this was here, but what's evolved in New Paltz is because for a number of reasons, because of the increase in the college, because of the increase, because the economy and the homes that are for sale on the market, that are being bought and now being used as rentals, things have changed. So the old law it needed to be fixed because we have new circumstances.
Oh, I don't have a problem with that. I just want to go through it without skipping to 129.8 when I don't feel like we've gone through all of 129.7.
Okay. Well, one thing is because it's taking two different articles and chapters, something's eliminated, something's added. It has to be renumbered, so it couldn't be renumbered exactly because not all those things are there. But I'm not.
Just go through it,
all right, I'll go through it, but I'm not gonna. What's that?
Just go through it piece by piece.
That's what I'm doing. I moved to the next piece, and I was referring to the number on the revision, not in the original code.
Could I suggest something?
Yeah.
Ariana, I think, at least I found it was easiest to read what is currently being proposed. Don't read it against the old law. Read it in its entirety as it's presented. And I think it makes more sense. Okay, I'd like to suggest two things in the beginning. I wouldn't call it streamlining. I'd just call it rental property registrations, annual rental property inspections, and housing standards enforcement. You don't need the word streamline.
I kind of didn't pay attention to that after I put it up.
I know.
But is there any? What you said there were two?
And you're not gonna just call it what it is. Just take that.
No. You said there was two things at the beginning.
Yeah, and then you're not going to include the whereases, are you?
Yes.
In the law?
Well, not in the code book. But you notice that the law is structured. This is actually how we're supposed to be structuring laws, as far as I know.
Well, that's
Part A is this is the local law. The only thing that's going in the code book are when the numbering starts. So everything else.
But when
having a
we adopt
legislative
it,
intent.
do you want it adopted with these whereases?
Yeah, I think that I'd like whereases with every law we have.
May I strike some?
That's
Or
why I put them in there.
suggestions?
Yeah,
Okay.
I wrote suggestions.
All right.
Because Kathy specifically said that the legislative intent of these things is
It's
important.
very important.
That's
And so
why.
this defines the legislative
Right.
intent of all
Okay,
laws.
I think number one whereas is unnecessary. I would keep number two whereas. Number three whereas. 4 is fine.
Why are we removing the legislative intent from the code?
I'm not,
No, you're not, but it's part of the whereas instead of part of the local law itself. That was 129.7, which
Yeah.
is now what was 129.8.
The-
And if the whereas part isn't going to be, because that's part of passing the law and not part of, from what I'm understanding, then maybe we should keep the legislative intent in there if Kathy says it's important
Yeah,
that we
I
have it
don't
at all.
know. I was thinking that because some sections of the Gold Code have that
I'm
and
asking the question.
some don't. It's not something we do consistently, but what we do consistently is when we have local laws do this, findings, the resolutions. So I thought
Right.
that since those are also legal documents, it might have the same effect. But that's something I can ask. If it strengthens to have it in
I
the
would
book,
prefer it to have it in the book
Alright.
as the legislative intent, just because if none of this part is going to be in the code itself, nobody can access it
Right.
unless they look through our minutes and
Well, I agree
resolutions.
with that.
you
It
know.
provides for history.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay, so that may solve this whole thing, so we don't need to do the whereas.
Yeah. Well, I'll just cut and paste them into something else and take out the ones that are irrelevant to something like that.
And then
Or I'll just have a simpler one at the top. That takes up most of the I'll split it into two.
legislative intent is to ensure decent housing for people who pay rent, period, again.
Well, well done.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go home!
All right. So going next through this, because we haven't actually gotten to any of the controversial parts yet.
Yeah.
I'd really like to get through
I
them
would
before
like
we
that as
retire.
well.
And we still have fracking and all this. But 129-8 of the proposed local law. Most of this is already things we require, and a lot of this is just administrative. And this is just something that Kat and I worked out is what the paperwork. What do we need to track this stuff? The one thing, number D8, I'm not sure if that's realistic or useful. There was section that if you owning back taxes or tickets or something, you have to pay them before we give you the rental
I
license.
kind of responded to that in my
Did you?
comments.
Where did that? s-
I said I put in here that where is it? A number of steps have been added to this, and this includes additional paperwork and tracking for the building department in order to process and inspect rental units. However, although this will increase our workload in the building department, I think it has a great concept of checks and balances that will benefit the village. For example, back taxes, fines, etc. So this is a good way of checking with the treasurer's office, is everything in order, sign off on that, so that we know that each property is, for lack of a better word, eligible, because everything is in order, and then proceed with the registration process.
And I thought that wouldn't necessarily be that too much work in comparison to other things. I mean, we do a one-day peddler's permit, and we have to run a
I
background check.
did the
that we send to
workload as a
police
whole,
department
and not
and-
just on that part,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
just for that part, Jason.
But just run that doesn't have Nancy or Rosanna
No,
Long
that's-
listen
that's
to back
exactly
taxes,
right.
wouldn't take that much time. And just it's because it seems easier. We're saying the filled out form constitutes a license, and you have to do these kinds of things. Where is it?
May I be picky for a
You
second?
may, of course.
E should be A, because it's far more important and it defines the whole rest of 129.8. So I would make all section E, A, and then begin down.
I think before we get into the,
You just want to deal with content first?
I would just like to, I want to hear,
Okay.
why, I want to hear why it's here, why we did it, what we're going for.
If there's
and
things
then-
like that, just email me tomorrow,
Right.
and I'll just dump them into
Right.
the next draft. So.
that stuff I think we
You
can
want
get
to do
through.
restructuring?
But we're in a
as an
workshop
after
meeting.
Proofreading and editing, email me later.
Right. I want to hear
I'll get to the controversial stuff.
the people who are living in squalor, we need to up the ante. This is how we're going to do it. This is why I
Right.
thought this was a good idea because that's really what we're going for.
Right.
I mean,
Well, okay, that's a good point. The fine grain stuff. The fine grain stuff is basically there's two problems. One is we know there's illegal rentals and with unsafe conditions that we can't currently get to help people, and we can't rely on tenants to do that for us because it's a conflict of interest and the risk of eviction.
Fear of retribution.
Yeah, fear of retribution. So we have to do it for people. One thing came up is what about the tenants? What about tenants' rights? Bad tenants, and that's also an issue. And in my mind, that's why there are leases between landlords and tenants. And on top of that, in those situations, it's almost invariably the landlord has all of the power, because if you're dealing with a building that's not a, well, you can check my here later. If I own a home, or I live in a home that I own, wait, that's a bad way to say it. Every rental property is a business, and every rental property generates income. So by having tenants make, give landlords more money, and then obviously tenants are giving away theirs. It's what they give is the housing. So if it's a matter of things like code violations and health and safety, one, it's state law to have certain things and certain conditions, including things that I wasn't aware of until I started writing this. Like, according to state law, it's illegal to have clogged gutters. It's illegal to have peeling paint. It is illegal to have falling plaster. All of those are illegal. It is illegal to have. It's illegal to have poison ivy. Look, here's one of the other things I did, and I'll give you an example. So what I was looking at was this: is that also if it's always in all cases the property owner's responsibility to keep their property up to code. It's never, under any circumstances, a tenant's responsibility.
Sure.
By law, it's what landlords are supposed to do. So keeping that, how do you keep that up? How do you enforce this uniformly and fairly? How do you get it applying to everybody who's living in this kind of power relationship? Maybe it's 60-40 Stuart instead of 100-0. But and basically, how do you protect people who, especially in a village with our demographics of, I think it's still 80% under 40, something like half the population is 18 to 24.
Okay.
So you've got, not only do we have 80% of our constituents are also renters. 75% are renters. So 75% of our constituents are renters. The vast majority of those renters are young, and the young are not only the least experienced and the least confident to do things like bring people to court, but also have the least resources to hire a lawyer, for instance. So there is a power imbalance given our demographics. That is not really relevant to what codes get enforced, but relevant in terms of making sure who we're collaring to get the properties up to code. And because these are businesses, that's why some of these, the punishments are in here as well. The fine went up from the 250 set in 2002, before the housing boom and before rents tripled, to the 750 now. And the reason that I think we need fines and penalties, there's also a provision that says that if if a property has its certificate of occupancy revoked, say for example, if that badly maintained is unsafe to live there, the landlord has to then pay for the tenants to move somewhere else, or to pay the rent until it's fixed.
Okay.
And the thinking behind that is that, well, when I sign a lease or anyone signs a lease, we have, I think, an obligation to expect that the place we're renting is all up to code.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that, when you drive a car, you gotta get it inspected, you gotta get it registered, you can't have a broken taillight, you can't have there's things that the government needs to enforce because no one else can. But because these rental properties are businesses, we have to make sure that our penalties are set so that they don't make more money breaking the law than by obeying it. And just give you one, Kathy, what was the estimate? You give me $600 a month a room on average for rent. So say you've got a 5-bedroom house you're renting out. That's $3,000 a month, $36,000 a year in revenue from one building. And if we're fining people $50 or $60 or $100 or $200 versus $36,000, I mean. And obviously that's mitigated by mortgage payments and all that. There's lots.
Right.
I'm oversimplifying to make the point.
Like you took
So
out
this
the
is the gist.
registration. You took out the registration fee.
No,
No?
no.
Yes, you did.
You shouldn't have.
Registration and inspection required. 129.8C in the draft.
No, it's right there. 129-8C.
Yeah, shall require an annual rental
Registration
registration fee as per
chapter
chapter 86 of the New Paltz Village Code.
Right. My original draft had $100 per tenant.
For chapter 86.
Kathy, maybe you explain that. This was your big issue with the law. Because originally my draft had $100 a tenant because what I thought it was a 6-bedroom house. We were charging $50 to register.
Right.
And then I did the math and that's just ridiculous.
Right.
And so $100 per tenant might seem better. So that way, you know, it seemed an easy, scalable response.
I told you you were out of your mind.
Yeah.
And we went back and forth.
And he isn't out of his mind.
Oh no, I am just
$3,000.
No, I just don't think.
$100 is not out of your mind.
I just disagree that it should be based on a tenant. I think it should be based on the structure, because it's the time going in to inspect a structure, and our fees are supposed to offset the cost of our department, okay? So I didn't feel that it should be by the person. I thought it should be by the structure. Now, when we had our fee, we increased our fees during the last administration. The village was sued by the landlords because they felt that the fees were unconstitutional, it was, you know, arbitrary and capricious and whatever. And we were able to show that the fees that we have implemented it's not a revenue making thing, it's to sustain the department. And we showed the time that involved administratively, going out and doing inspections, re-inspections, court time, because those are all factors that you have to consider, you know, in it. So and we've come to some conclusion that we're not going to do the per tenant, well, you know, but we do have to modify something somewhere, but it is not going to be per person. It has to be by a structure, and
it has to be by
it can't
the person,
I
because
disagree.
if Rosalind rents one room
okay,
and you rent 8 rooms, you should be paying more than Rosalind.
Right. But if you exactly. Well, exactly. I mean, that's it. You should be paying more. But
that's right.
But now it takes the same amount of time to inspect that room if 2 people are living in it, or 3 people are living in it. It's still the same size room.
that was what I was saying. When I walk into a room and there's a king size bed.
They pay by room.
That's what she's saying. Structurally.
Structure, not people.
No, structure. She didn't say room.
Oh, well, okay, that's
Structure is the structure.
A structure-based formula rather than a person-based formula.
Right. Because you can have.
It has to be.
That's what we had. Well, I don't have chapter 86 here, but
I'm looking at it and I actually can't find what you're referencing in chapter 86.
86, the fees.
I'm
They're
looking
all a
for that.
building permit
Is that an 86?
fees.
It's under building
penalties and
permits?
offenses. Is that what we're looking under?
No.
It's not under any of this.
It's in the village code.
Oh, I see.
got it?
Maybe. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Building permit inspection and certificate of occupancy fees.
And then you go through there and your non-owner occupied rental, those are
Yeah,
those are
$300 for the first 5,000 cubic feet of volume.
No, that's for building.
Oh, down lower.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, went too far. Certificate of occupancy,
Down.
residential, commercial, CO searches. That's it. It should be above that. No. Then it's exemptions, and it's state uniform code.
That's in there.
State
Yeah.
uniform code.
Yeah,
How
well,
about
well,
when we
yeah.
get the revision of the law, you provide us with a list of the.
So yeah, it's right. Yeah.
one of the other things we started talking about that just seemed easier to separate out from this law, as this is around why this came up about having the fees at the reorg, was I'm pretty sure all of our fees across the board in the village now are less than what we should be charging, because the law says that we, you know, basically our fees can cover our expenses. But what we generally base it on is percentage of salary time. So it's an hour of Kathy's time is considered an hour's worth of her salary, but really it's you know, the total shared operating expenses of the village plus the entire operating budget of the building department, including plowing, hour meetings, this, everything. Put that into basically calculate how long it takes to keep the building department lights on for 1 hour, and that's what we should, you know, that kind of
He's trying to
charge.
take the total package. That's
right, because it is more time, because it's, you know, training, it's the uniform purchase, it's the mileage, everything that adds up over with the village's 3/4
And
square
our
miles.
Billing rate.
Yes, that's what we need.
And
So
our fees are supposed to offset the cost of.
right, and they're not offsetting all of our costs
Right.
at the moment. So
Because the
Did you
billing
find
rate,
it?
Kathy, is different.
Fees for annual inspections.
There you go.
A non-owner occupied
That's
multiple
it.
dwelling and mixed use.
Mhm.
1 to 3 units, $50 per rental unit. 4 to 9 units, $100 plus 45
That's it.
per rental unit.
Those are the bids.
These are the ones.
Mm-hmm.
So those will be increased. Is that what I'm saying?
We didn't
haven't
increase,
determined-
instead of
right.
talking
Not
about that, we
this.
pulled it out of this,
Right.
and because from our conversations, once we started getting to that one, we started thinking about the other ones, so we thought what I might try to do is see how feasible it is to pull basically all of the dollar figures out of the code entirely, and just have, and put formulas in the code.
Okay.
And then so they're to be calculated after every budget's adopted or something, prior to the reorg. It just becomes an automatic function of the treasurer once the budget's filed and we have the new accurate numbers of the operating expenses and we have a list of formulas. It's just a spreadsheet, and spits out the new
Sure.
cost. So that's what that
That sounds
thinking
great.
was.
Can
But
I
that would be.
Yeah, Rosalind, please.
I just want to say that I moved here 4 years ago. I used the New Paltz Times online and the Almanac to look for apartments. And I cannot believe, some of the apartments that I went to see. It was appalling. And I'm in an apartment now. In fact, Kathy's come and goes to my apartment every year and checks, and it's fine. But to me, and I'm very interested in this because the crux of it is you've got to get the registration. Once you know who's where, then you can figure out, the inspection, and you can figure out the enforcement. And I was wondering, I know there was a landlord-tenant committee, and they were trying to figure out how can we find out which houses are renting to students and that kind of structure. And to me, that's the key, is finding out who's where.
It's pretty easy to
Is
walk down the street
Yeah,
and see a house, and if there are 10 mailboxes,
yeah.
you know it's not a private residence.
I'll pass this around. I guess we'll do it together. Just to give you some context, this is what we use now for the inspections. Here's our registration, and here's the checklist we have.
Oh,
This is the status quo checklist.
Okay.
Just to show you what we use now. And so after doing this, and I went through and read all of the requirements in the state property code to compare it against the village. So this is one Kathy and I came up with that are actually, none of this is a change in law. This is all status quo, because the building inspector must, by state law, enforce the state property maintenance code even if we don't have it in our village code.
And these are things
So this is what
that I
we're supposed to be
look for
doing now.
Every time we go in, these are things
Right.
that this is just putting it down on paper
Right.
and having a checklist so that you have supporting documentation.
And these rephrasings are just basically, the questions are just, I don't know, do you want
That's
to
not
see this?
something we were given, no.
No, I'm not. I'm just not done working on it. Oh, you want
Okay.
it? Here.
That's enough.
To me, the most important thing is that all rental properties in the village of New Paltz must be inspected. I don't care whether they're owner occupied. Okay, they must be.
Mhm.
And they must be up to code. And they
Absolutely.
must be registered. And when you register, you get the checklist
Mhm.
of what it's supposed to be. And when you come, if I haven't done it, guess what? I don't get to rent it.
Let's talk about that provision. This one was Sally's idea, actually. That if you have a certain number of code violations, did we put that in, or was that going to be
Yes.
added?
I think you did
No,
6 within
They
or
get
something within
warnings and they get this and they get that. And I think if something is not up to code, you don't have the right to rent it. I don't think that's a big biggie here.
Well, I think Jason did, because we did discuss this at great lengths as well. Prior to any inspections, the applicant must pay the inspection fee,
Right.
and it gets inspected. They're given a copy of with the registration form.
That's correct. with
They
the
are
checklist.
given the checklist, so they know firsthand what we're going in to look for. So when we go there, if there's a violation, they've already been made aware of it. So we really shouldn't be finding these things.
That's
That's
right.
what our pretext is. And so then enforcement action would proceed after that. Now,
Look, Kathy, what I'm saying to you is, enforcement is nonsense if I'm not up to code. There's nothing to enforce, I'm not allowed to rent. That's the bottom line.
that I have a problem with. Because
I don't.
I do, because if you have a license, or it's maybe for somebody new, maybe for a new rental, and it's for a new registration, but you have people that have been out there that have been renting homes and everything. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna tell them that this is what I'm gonna be looking at, and and if they don't do it, then they're given an appearance ticket to court, and they have to pay a fee.
When this new code goes into effect, it seems to me that everybody should have to come into your office and register. It's a new law. You don't owe them any favor. They're doing a favor for themselves.
Well,
They're in it.
they don't, we need to go over the process because that's not how it's done. We have a list and it's periodically generated on a monthly basis. There are property owners that are due like all through the year. We do rental inspections all through the year on an annual basis. So like at the beginning of September, the Holly is running all the lists for inspections in October, sending out the notifications. I am missing your point because
you're missing my point.
I am.
When this law goes into effect,
Yes.
it would seem to me that the building department would generate a letter. Dear landlord, if you know who they are, the village has instituted a new law which requires all property, whether it's owner-occupied or non-owner occupied, of a registration and licensing of your rental properties. Please stop in the office, fill out the registration form, at which time you will be given a copy of those items which will be checked upon our inspection. Now, this is my question to Jason. I guess we don't have an answer. How many of those, now, presumably, if I'm a serious person and I'm a good landlord or want to be, I'd go down that checklist before you came to see my property.
That was the reason for sending the checklist.
Mm-hmm. No, you're giving it to them.
But no, all right.
When they
say
register,
giving, okay.
you're giving it to them. Mm-hmm. That was an idea that we had.
Mm-hmm.
So then you come out.
Mm-hmm.
Now, presumably, everything that's on that checklist should be in compliance.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And if it isn't, and if it is not, it seems to me a determination has to be made by us or you or us in conjunction with you. How many may I violate before I'm told?
I get your point. 0 is the number.
So if
let me answer your question. If it's actually in the law, the registration requirements. For a license to be valid, it must be accompanied by a successful annual inspection report. Shall follow the following procedure. If there are no code violations, the applicant may continue registering the property.
Mm-hmm.
If there are code violations, the building inspector shall deliver an order. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me step up. Prior to any inspections, they pay a fee. The building inspector then. This is before they're given their license.
Mm-hmm.
Pay the fee. Kathy goes to inspect it, and there has to be a yes on every single one of those check boxes. And if there is, you get your license.
Okay.
If there's not, you get an order to remedy for any violation that we found.
Mm-hmm.
And if in 30 days, is it in 30 days?
It says 30 days.
After 30 days, the building inspector shall re-inspect the property and then automatically give appearance tickets. But that's only for first-time registrants.
Right.
So Ariana's a landlord, and her annual inspection is next Thursday. All that changes for her is when she re-registers, any conditions her property doesn't currently go to this one, but it's not a new registration. So when we go to Ariana's, because that entire checklist, every property, and that actually checklist is not residential, that's all property owners. Homeowners have to meet all those conditions at all times, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if Ariana's inspection is next Thursday, what this law, or not next, say a month from now, what this law says is that 30 days prior to Kathy showing up at your house, you're mailed this checklist as well as having it given to you when you register. And that clears us with the presumption that no one can say we didn't know what we had to do.
Right.
So when Kathy shows up, anything that meet that checklist at your house, at your rental, you're getting a court ticket for, like the way you get a parking ticket or something. Because what we do now, and correct me if I get this wrong, so I'm a landlord, Kathy comes and inspects my property. Well, for one thing, I believe pay a $50 fee to postpone, to cancel the
No, the
inspection.
$50 fee is for no-show. Like if you make an appointment and I knock on your door and you're not there, you wasted my time.
But if it would cost me
So you get
$100 to
invoice.
fix what I know is wrong, it's cheaper for me to pay the $50 fine, which is one of the things that we get into. But because this is important to know, because this is going to be one of the controversial things. The 30 days ahead of time, we let you know what you have to do. The day of you get a ticket is much different than what we do now. And it's based on the presumes that you're supposed to know that your taillight is out. It's not the cop's job to explain to you all the laws of the road. So right now it's you set an appointment for the inspection, which is usually a couple weeks away from when you call, right? Then either no show, then it gets redone. So if someone just skips on it, so that's maybe 2 months gone. When Kathy shows up, if she sees violations, they're given an ordered remedy.
They're given a
with
notice of violation.
A notice of violation with a time frame in which to fix the problem.
And we try to make it like 10 days.
10 days.
This is current.
This is current.
So now and then 10 days to fix it. Kathy goes back again, and if they still haven't fixed it, what happens then? Another
appearance ticket to court.
Appearance ticket. So we're basically cutting out something like 3 months of our enforcement provisions, and that's just the inspections. And that doesn't include things like when we get calls for code violations or whatnot. So.
Look, we're mixing apples and oranges, I think.
Probably.
Right now, only non-owner occupied have to register and be inspected.
Correct.
I'm saying
Everybody has to.
everybody's going to be
So
now.
But
So that's what this says.
That's the law.
And therefore, I think if we're gonna start a new system, we need to re-register
Everybody.
everybody.
Oh.
That's
What,
all
like,
I'm trying to say.
Oh, I see. This invalidates all current rental registrations?
No, it just is going to
That,
make
I'm
them
not
start
sure there's
again.
enough hours in the day.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
75% of our population are rentals.
rentals.
I mean, every single day we're out inspecting. If we had to do them all at once, it may actually, it would take the same amount of time as just waiting, right? But because this checklist has nothing to do with the law in terms of it's not anything that gets approved, this is just formatting.
We're not going to miss. We're not going to miss
everyone
anybody
has to
by
still be
sending
doing
this.
that.
Everybody is going to be held to the same standard. Nobody is going to get away with doing anything. It's just that because this law has been on the books for as long as it has, and because it has been it's been divvied up, for lack of a better word, because we have complexes, we have apartment complexes. New Paltz Estates has 227 units. That takes a considerable amount of time to do. But then you have your maybe Village Arms or New Paltz Commons, the smaller developments. Those don't take as much time. So we have a set schedule that every year it's an interval inspection, and every month it shows up which ones are due. And those are the ones that Holly sends out the notices to, along with the paperwork saying, fill it out with your form and everything. Once we get the payment, we send them the date that we're coming. So what I believe Jason wants us to do is, along with that process, include that checklist, and along with an explanation, these are the items that we will be looking for, and language saying that it's a violation if it's not done. When we do the inspection, that it's considered a violation at that time, because you've been notified that this is what we expect. Right.
So, explain to me how I lived in a house or an apartment for the last year that had no screens on any of the windows and chipping paint all over the windows. And that's in the current, this is in the current list, that I can't do that. Now, where was
The inspector.
well, I mean, you guys came, you checked for my fire alarms and all that was in fine working order,
Check your
but
fire alarms.
checked my fire alarms, took a peek around. You may have even mentioned to my landlord about the screens.
We did.
I believe you did.
We did.
But there's no follow-up, and the new people moved in when I moved out, and there's still no screens in the windows, and no paint. We're waiting a full year. Was he ever fine? Was he ever certain
Paint on
appearance?
inside, paint on outside.
Like, well, there would be a screen in between the glass and, so that the paint is in here, all chipped up and cracked.
Paint on inside.
Well, I mean, depends what you consider inside. Is outside of the glass inside, or is inside of the screen inside?
Because I have had people paint their house because they have had chip paint.
Well,
They've
I
had
mean,
to
they
go out
should.
there, and they should, and it's part of property maintenance.
But I had no
We
screens
have
on my
done that.
windows for a year. How is that possible?
For your individual one, I can't answer that right now because I have to go back and I have to look. But sometimes it's seasonal, and I'm not trying to make an excuse.
No, I'm not trying to put it on.
If you have an inspection in the winter,
Right.
I'm going to look for storms, or I'm going to look for things like that. If it's in the summertime, I'm going to make sure that I should make sure that you have ventilation, that you're able to have screens in your windows and things. So
And
that's
you ask in the summer if there's winter windows.
Storm windows. She means it.
If
Are you
there's
asking
storm-
for
If
windows?
you're doing this seasonal, you're arguing seasonal.
See, that-
So in the wintertime, it would seem to me, you'd ask, are there screens?
Well, here's
Well,
the
see, this is too. It's very convoluted because you have a lot of older houses that don't have the mechanicals for a screen and the newer windows. Okay, so you have it right in there. So some of the landlords give the ones that they're expandable.
Sure.
Okay.
Right.
Some of the landlords, which I don't like, but it's a gray area in the code, give you the screen material and tell you to put that around the window. Okay. No, they have. Yeah, they have. They really have.
But they shouldn't have.
That shouldn't be acceptable.
First of all, the landlord should be doing that, not the
I'm not
tenant.
saying. No, you're right.
Okay, but the point being is we have these things on record. Now, I'm not trying to call it negligence. I'm saying, is it that we don't have enough support from the building department to do the follow-up? Is this happening? Because I mean, in other places I've lived too, there are definitely violations just in the not even the extended New York State one that Jason told me to him, but in the just basic village one.
Right, you also got to realize a lot of times these people, these landlords, they know we're coming. So when we go to these buildings, everything, the third floor has no bedrooms in it, okay? I mean, this is a scheduled appointment, and it has to be. It's not, we just can't show up arbitrarily and not bang your door. Okay? So when I get there and everything is okay, everything is okay, I leave and all of a sudden 5 more people move in.
Right. But
that's the difference.
This is an exact example of you even noted it. You mentioned it to my landlord, and he didn't do anything to change it for a year. And the new people moved in, and there's still no screens. So what can we do before we even? I mean, we haven't even scraped the surface of this, but what can we do just to enforce the existing state regulations? I mean, this is like the most basic.
I like the checklist that Jason put
To
together.
send them right off the bat.
I wrote the checklist half for us and half, a third for us, a third for the tenants, and a third for the landlord.
Right.
Because one of the other changes in the law would be that both the tenants, every tenant gets provided a copy of the checklist as well as a copy of the report.
Not just
so that you would have had in the mail the thing that showed the checklist, everything more. But also, I don't know. I've been trying to figure out the same question. I mean, my apartment has issues. Every apartment I've lived in New Paltz has issues. I lived in the 3rd floor of that illegal apartment of a barn. I've lived in other.
I've lived in illegal.
Because that's the only way you can afford to live in New Paltz sometimes, unfortunately. But the point is that with because Kathy just kind of took over in the past. I guess in this calendar year, it was Rodney ran the department. Then it was Trey before him, and Allison before Trey. And
I got it in January.
So it's kind of a new start. But the other reason is that the people who set up the system that we all inherited, are long gone. But also the system was disorganized, and you can see the checklist that we currently use has it's like a third the size.
Okay.
So we're not even listing for each other what we have to do, and I'm trying to.
Please go ahead.
It's a weird concept because I don't. The checklist came from an article I read that said that it talked about when early air travel, the first pilots, and they created a pre-flight checklist as a safety measure because they would forget things and the plane would go down.
Sure.
But that was back then, and I read an article, and I think I found a link for the American Medical Association that said a surgeon at a hospital did the same thing based on the aeronautical model, where all the surgeons had to check the list and everything, and in both cases, the response from the pilots and doctors was resistance. It was we're professionals, we know what.
I don't want to do a checklist.
But it was something like but when the hospital initiated a checklist, I think it was somewhere between 20 and 30% fewer infections and surgery fatalities. So obviously, if it works for planes and surgery, I figured we just had a checklist with everything, and
The checklist
and-
is a
and
great idea.
that we now have a department head who is not a building inspector
Right.
and does a different job and has to check in much more often. You know, whoever's signature's on the bottom of that page, as far as I'm concerned, if there's a box not checked, or if it's incomplete,
There's accountability.
that's
exactly
that's
right.
grounds for, you know, in my mind, that's severe disciplinary actions because it's putting public
Somebody
health
at
and
risk.
safety at risk.
Somebody at risk.
And so
exactly.
basically, rather than rely on institutional memory, this is the point I'm trying to grope for. So much about the village is done on institutional memory and handshake deals.
Okay.
It's what Blue remembers or what this,
Right.
so we've done this way. We don't have standard operating procedures, we don't have protocols, we don't have processes.
It's past practice.
It's tradition. So
What
if
is
you're,
this G 40%?
Huh?
What is this G 40%?
oh, it's for formatting, it means I want to change that to gray 40% because it's too hard to read.
Oh, that makes sense
Yeah.
because I was thinking, why is this so
It's too hard,
hard
it's
to
too late,
read?
yeah.
This is
So
great.
basically, the thinking is that once
You have
whoever the
a
building
checklist.
inspector signs
I
up,
think this
idiot
is
proof.
great.
You know, just everyone has to do it. So whether it's Holly or Kathy or we hire a
How-
tenant,
How long
but
have we?
also giving it to tenants with explanations,
Sure.
you know ahead of time.
Right.
So
and
it's,
it
you
gives
know,
the parents
Yeah.
the ability
Exactly.
There we
to
go.
look. Yeah.
Exactly.
Sure. There's an extra pair of eyes.
But
But
yeah.
how long have we had our current checklist? Years. Years. And even what's on the checklist now isn't being upheld. What do we do? I mean, before we start blasting extra fines, before we start doing all these big things,
Yeah.
I mean,
We're
we
not talking
all
extra
have.
fines, we're talking an increased fines, which is necessary.
Okay.
How do
What
we
do we-
enforce what
How
we
do we
currently
enforce what we
have?
currently have? Because I mean, from my experience, from Jason's experience, from Ariana's experience, I don't think Stuart's living in illegal housing, but you never know. It's like you two, Sally.
Have you not seen the airplanes in the backyard?
That's not,
That's why I'm
That's
talking
not-
about law because we
that's
can't.
not
The
exactly-
tools we have are poor.
So you're saying we
Wait,
can't do
wait,
it?
wait.
I mean, is that?
That exactly what happened was you asked me to come up with a checklist.
Yeah.
All right. When you go and you do your inspections, what do you look for? Correct.
Mhm.
And when we pull up right away, we start looking at the exterior of the property. You know, so there were things. So I just and it's not as nicely done as Jason's because I'm not that good with the computer. But those were the things that he asked me. He said, "What is it that you
So you
look
just
for?"
you just wrote this down.
Not just. It was a few months ago, right?
Oh, so you had a
So this
checklist.
checklist
So
is not-
you've had a checklist up here, but there was
There's
never a
been
written.
anything.
There was never a
No.
written checklist at all.
No.
No.
Okay.
The form we've had for years.
The form
That's
we've had.
Oh, just
The
just
form-
just
we've had
this. That's the
form, We've
registration.
had the form and going in and doing the inspection.
But there was no
There
written
was never a
checklist.
That one
checklist.
you could think of as the first draft of this, but it's like 6 months old.
It's
so
yeah,
it's a
it's
big difference.
okay.
So I mean, first institutional thing before we even go through all this written checklist. Great idea.
I think so.
I think
but
it's a
not
great
idea.
only that,
Absolutely.
They're
Absolutely.
gonna be all over it now.
it not only that, but it also gives you the tracking device
Exactly.
for citing them.
Exactly.
Because quite frankly, Kathy, what was the point of the inspection if there was no checklist and no order to remedy at all?
Right, because I didn't have screen
Well, give me
screen.
some credit for having a little bit of knowledge of
No, but-
certain
but
No, we
okay.
do, of course.
But
But
that's
in
why
terms of
that's why that
institutional
checklist is important.
Absolutely.
It's and when Jason said, you know, this is what I want to do, and I want to incorporate the sections of the code. I said, oh my God, that makes it so much easier because then when I have to do an appearance ticket, I don't have to go back and reference everything.
Right.
Everything is right there.
The same thing with the
No.
follow-up. Like, for example, my windows, you would have had that unchecked, you could have put that in the follow-up, and then the next week, called back up my landlord and said, hey, what's going on?
Actually, what would happen if this law passes
Right.
Right.
is that Kathy
We've
shows
got
up to
court.
your apartment and sees the lack of screens.
Right.
As every no gets a ticket to court.
Exactly.
Every single check no
It's a
on
separate
the
violation.
Right,
Well, see
right.
now, okay, I
But
guess.
that's
and then-
That's what I think.
Yeah, so, I mean, I do have an issue that,
Answered my question.
I do have an issue that 5 citations, so I'm assuming that each missed check is a citation.
Yes.
Okay, so after 5 citations, you lose your license
I
to.
have, that was another one of my
Yeah.
comments. in that.
So we go from
Do you
something
wanna
to
hear my
a motion.
comment?
Please, I would love to. I'm
Went
sorry I
from
didn't
one
get to
extreme
read
to
the-
another.
Alright.
Well, yeah, very some extremes.
Isn't that your idea?
And that was under what, 129.13 enforcement?
I don't know. But then Sally's
I believe
doing,
so.
we've got to
It says-
figure out her question.
I said, I agree with the concept, I feel that it should be that the property is cited for the same violation with this 6-month period. If a violation is corrected, there should not be, if a violation is corrected, there should not be a punishment. If somebody, now this goes like, if how do I explain this?
Like
The
when you
current
go to
way-
court and you get a ticket for your
Right.
taillight being out, the
Right.
cop will let you off
Right.
if you prove the receipts that you
However, neglecting to address an issue that you know is a violation is another matter, okay? So again, I agree, but I'm not sure how to move forward with that type of,
All right, let's talk this out.
okay.
I'm now an experienced renter. I'm not a new person.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not an owner-occupied rental. I've been renting for years. Okay. You send me a letter, you say, I'm coming to inspect you, here's what I'm going
Right.
to look for. Kathy,
Mm-hmm.
common sense tells me
Mm-hmm.
that if you find any violations,
Mm-hmm.
guess what?
You're getting an appearance ticket.
You get
And
the
you're gonna have
appearance
to pay.
ticket and you don't get rewarded for correcting it.
No, you have to pay. You get an appearance ticket, go to court, and you pay a fine.
Right. And then you go back and make sure
That it's corrected.
that it's corrected.
Exactly.
My question,
Mm-hmm.
which I've been trying to get the answer to, how many of those before I lose my license?
That's what we were.
It
Why
says
five?
6.
here 5.
This
Five.
is-
I got 6 on
This
mine.
this says 5, and it doesn't in a 6-month period. It says.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah,
but
but
it doesn't
5 or
say
more citations.
it doesn't
is
say
okay.
the same citation either. It says
No,
just
that was
5
my wording.
citations.
That was my wording. That was not
Okay.
his.
Because really 5 citations. I mean, like you could get 5 citations in one shot and lose your license.
But now this is the other thing. You said we're saying during the course of the year. Does that mean I get called by a tenant and the tenant says I have no hot water, I have no whatever's on that list. Now I've done the inspection
You've done
and
this?
they've passed.
They passed.
Everything I've gone to, everything that was on that checklist is addressed.
And
But I get called in at another time because remember these are annual inspections.
Mhm.
So I have a tenant that calls me and says I have no heat.
okay.
Okay, so that's one citation. You gotta fix it. Are you saying that every time that the landlord does something wrong, if he has
No,
up to
I'm
5, he
saying the
loses his
first
license?
time you go in
Mm-hmm.
to a seasoned landlord,
Mm-hmm.
and there are 6 violations.
You want me to shut down his house?
That's right.
Oh.
You got the checklist.
Uh,
You've been renting for years. That says one of 2 things
So then
to
what?
me.
But what happens to the? What? All right.
Then the
Then what
students
happens
are
to
out,
the
and then the
tenant?
landlord is paying for the students to live in other housing.
Yeah, but
Over,
yeah, but okay. Imagine being that tenant.
right.
I
You
don't want to
uproot all your
move
stuff.
all my shit mid-semester.
We
Like
just
maybe
had
it's finals time. Maybe it's like that's not. Ooh, I just said a curse word.
Ariana, I'm not concerned.
My bad.
I'm not concerned in that sense about the tenants. I am concerned about decent housing before you ever move in.
Right, but you know what? At the
I
same
agree
time,
with you,
at
Sally.
the same time, if you fine them monetarily for each violation, as opposed to revoking the license and moving the people out, eventually the negatives add up over the positive because we talk about mortgage and we talk about all the costs. So, you're making $36,000 a year, then let's say, 15, 20, whatever it is in overhead. So now you have a profit margin of, $20,000, 11, whatever the profit margin is. Now all of a sudden you start getting citations, and if you're fined for every citation, you're losing your profit margin. So there is a reason to not
If the fine is
violate.
big enough.
Well,
we're not, in one way to think of it, we're not giving them any citations. They're choosing to inflict citations upon
On
themselves
themselves,
by
I agree.
ignoring the law that we provide.
Okay, however you want to interpret that.
I agree with you.
That's
That's why I
But
don't.
Some people are just masochists, Brian. It's like,
That's why I don't want to give them 5 and 6 months.
See,
I just can't see having somebody move out.
Right, that to me seems very. Like if you don't have heat for 6 months, or you don't have heat throughout the winter.
That's a bad example.
Right. That's a very
That's a
extreme
very
example.
bad example.
Granted, I have woke up in a house without heat before, but that was my own.
Okay.
But the point being is, I think that might be a little extreme for my taste. I think if we can set ourselves on a fine and then fine for citations, and then I don't know, maybe we can work out some sort of way before the fine happens if you can rectify it next month.
People understand money.
Right. People understand. I mean, that's the bottom
No,
line.
I understand what we're doing here, and I see the purpose. I just think we're really going from having, well, I wouldn't say nothing, but
okay, yes, thank you. Sorry.
to give credit where credit is due, I would not say nothing. But I think that, you know, in terms of going to this far and extreme, maybe we should have one step between this and what that might be to help people get up to code and our current code before we're kicking people out of houses and condemning places.
I'm making money. I should be doing the proper thing.
And if you're not, you're getting fined.
And
the
if
fines
you're
have
not,
been
you're
tripled.
getting fined, and you should be fined
The
very
fines are
heavily.
technically, actually the fines are probably about what they were in real dollars as they were in 2000.
So
Between inflation
But you're
It's
talking
like having a half a stop sign in a new intersection, Ariana. I'm going to put half the stop sign up so you get used to it.
the penalties are
I don't quite see it the same way.
That makes sense to me.
the penalties are per violation.
Right. Are we all hearing this?
No, I'm
The
missing
penal-
it.
The penalties are per violation.
Which makes sense.
It's not I go in a house and find 10 things wrong and take you to court and say I want to fine.
No, I understand that.
It's per violation.
Right.
But Kathy, I think 6 months, what is it, 5 violations in
In a
6
6-month
months is excessive.
I don't know,
I would
because-
be really interested on we
Well-
gotta work on this one because I'm not comfortable
No,
having.
okay,
no, she doesn't mean excessive, she means too weak.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
she
the
does.
opposite.
She knows what I
so now, okay, let's
I
say,
definitely know. What
Yeah,
she
we
does.
understand.
let's say you have a group of very rowdy people living in a house, and they punch out all the windows, and they put holes in the walls, and
I've been to
they.
a couple of these.
You may have been to a few.
One
That's why landlords.
Brian might be one of these too.
That's why they get security.
Well, no, that's what they get security. But let's say they do 5 violations worth of problems, then all of a sudden the house is condemned because the students caused it, and the landlord doesn't have time to fix that.
Give me a break.
I wouldn't put it past.
Take them to small place. Brian, if I owned the property that I rented,
Right.
first of all, I think I would have a lease that would protect me from that.
Right, but you don't have time to stop that. If they smash out all the windows and then the building
The
inspector
neighbors
shows
call
up,
the next day.
or the neighbors call the next day and the building inspector shows up and there's 5 violations.
Well, I
Within
think
6
the building
months.
inspector in this instance, if I, as the landlord, showed up and saw all the windows smashed out, the police would be called and you would be arrested.
You'd think so.
I do.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I don't
Brian
think so.
on that one.
And I think this is a very real issue because you're right, there are security deposits and there are leases to cover that stuff, but we want to make sure the landlords are holding up their end of the bargain, but we also don't want to put them in a position where they're getting screwed up because you have to remember some of the people who are renting in this community don't mind living in places that aren't as nice as we would as even the New York State code would have it be.
Yeah.
You know, like
There are people who would rather live in a place that's already trashed because they're going to trash it
they're
anyway.
gonna trash it anyway. So, and I don't want to hold people who are
College
creating
students.
housing. I know.
I used to be a person who did not really care about what kind of place I lived in.
So, I mean,
I was a little hippie chick.
You know, I'm hearing
Now
a
I'm
lot of
government.
stuff about the tenants, but I gotta tell you something. There are some really, really bad tenants. There are
Yeah,
some really, really bad landlords.
agreed.
exactly.
But there are some
And there's some
really,
good.
really great landlords that
Right.
take care of their problems, that deserve a respect from the tenant
Yeah,
and to take care of their property.
absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
Sure.
And that seems, I had one today, and it was like, I went into mommy mode. It was crazy. They're
Yeah.
calling me for one thing, and the place was disgusting.
Right.
You know, I
Right.
mean, you can't have it both ways. You can't expect me to go out there and give your landlord a hard time because of one thing.
Right.
When you're doing all these other things
Right.
that are you know, minimizing and hurting
I
this
beg your
property.
pardon, I disagree with you absolutely.
Well,
You are the village building inspector,
Mhm.
you enforce the code.
Yes.
And it is the village's responsibility and duty to make sure that our buildings are all up to code.
Now, I'm not saying that.
And
I'm saying
people,
that.
and I have no objection
You know what I mean?
to people renting for profit.
Sally,
However, they've got to be able to.
You-
No,
no, but
I'm not saying that I'm
she's-
not up
yeah.
to code. I'm saying I go into a house because of a code issue. That code issue absolutely, positively has to be addressed.
Right.
Okay? And then as I'm walking down the stairs, I'm seeing bags of garbage. I'm seeing beer bottles and everything. I'm seeing the whole yard trashed. I'm seeing paint and graffiti all over the house. Excuse me.
Then the
The
landlord,
tenants have a responsibility to the landlords as well.
Yeah.
that's right, and it is the landlord's responsibility to make sure that the tenant is living up to them, not yours.
How do you do that?
I respectfully
I
disagree
feel
with
very
that.
I don't know.
I
you know, I
respectfully
think this is
disagree with
this
that.
is where it gets really
I respect
tricky.
because our
Yeah.
property maintenance code does address a lot of those things and the exterior of a structure, and that is state code, and that is my job to enforce.
Yeah, and if people are gonna be all up in arms about chickens lowering property value, you know, living next to a house where it's totally trashed in the yard every, you know, the
Yeah.
front and back, it's the same kind of thing.
Sally, that's part of the code.
And,
But
and
Ariana-
I'm not the kind of person who
Ariana-
did that, but
The landlord does not have to rent or continue to rent to people who trash his or her property.
How would one know, though?
Try
They go and look.
Try being a landlord and throwing out your tenants. How difficult is that?
It's really difficult.
I've done it, and listen,
Oh, I've
False.
been to court. I've
False.
been to court. I have been to court
if
on
your lease is a good lease and you
False.
have a good
False.
attorney drawn up, Kathy,
No.
I disagree with you.
In New York State, in the eyes of New York State sides with the tenant.
Absolutely.
That's the truth. That is the truth.
Pennsylvania, they don't, so.
New York, I do.
In relation, to your workshop, sorry, that's what I did.
That was pretty big, right? The whole thing.
Yeah, I just figured let that, you know,
Yeah.
blow over and then just figure out what's going on now.
Fine.
No, there was actually 3 points I wanted to talk, and I can't remember any of them. Ariana, Kathy, and Sally.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not your fault. I just can't remember things anymore. So I want to make sure that there's not anything else that would be. I don't want people to feel blindsided because we've got a chance to talk about something that could come off. Was there anything else that was? I mean, anything else? Does anything not make sense? Is there? I mean,
I think some things,
I mean, some of the things
I mean,
would
logical
address-
sense, not like you disagree with, but just like
No, no,
it
no.
wouldn't work,
Define
or it's like
things.
broken systems.
Yeah, this,
Well-
I mean, I'm gonna obviously have
The which?
revisions.
I mean, we
define-
just.
I think the
I don't feel like we came to
define
any kind of
violations
conclusion that we all
of the
agreed on
same
there.
No, I didn't think we would.
That we might be
No,
able
we
to
just,
work
I think, I
could
really
deal with
wanted
that.
to get, I mean, when Jason said we were gonna have this, and I said I'd like to be in attendance because this is something that
Oh
that
yeah.
I do.
I'm very glad you're here.
And because, you know, you guys could talk amongst yourselves all night long and I'm the person, the
You're an
go-to
actor.
person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I mean, Jason, did you say that the checklist is an administrative tool and
Mhm.
that it can be altered at any time?
Yeah, it's not part of the law. It's not actually something the board approves. We don't
Okay.
generally approve forms. It's just something the departments create. This is
Okay.
just a more efficient way to do it.
Because I do, you know, I know this was given to us a month ago, but I do see this taking a little while to implement. I think it's gonna be a lot of discussion before it gets there.
Do you mean implement by
The law.
between now and
Well,
whether it passes, or if it passes before it starts?
before we even pass.
Okay.
I think there's going to be discussion before, but I think that implementing a solid checklist would be an amazing first step.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that that's good too.
To
These
and
are
I think-
almost done. I mean,
Yeah.
we're using them the next week actually.
So I think that could be a good step in the right direction to start. And I mean, you know, just pointing that out.
legal question.
Hmm.
The checklist
Mm-hmm.
should be a part of the code. So.
It already is. this is what this is a crib sheet of this New York State Property Maintenance Code.
You just
and
said
the
it was an
building code.
administrative function and not part of the code.
Right.
They
The
take
particular
parts of
like
the code.
the particular like how it looks and what information's on here is not part of the code. The description of what information goes on the registration form is in both codes.
Right.
This, if you see, this column is a citation, Village Code, section 129.28. All
So
this is
that is in
already
the code.
in the state code of Village Code. Every single thing in here.
So it is in the code.
Yes.
This is all existing code.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry.
You did not, you better clarify
You
that
said.
when Brian.
I thought you said did the check this as if like we would take
No.
this form and stick it into the code book
No,
for
no,
for
No, no,
reference.
that's already there.
Because we do have other
It's
things like that.
referenced
Yeah.
in the code.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah,
that
this is
is
a-
what I think Brian was asking.
This is
and I
boiling
think
down
we
all the
clarify.
codes that need to be enforced.
But I still
Okay,
think
thank
that
you.
if on the issue of 6 or 5 violations in 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
if you made that 5 violations or 5 violations of the same violation in 6 months, I could live with it. In other words, you're letting them have 6 months. We'll let that.
129.
13B. 13B.
So you're
Well,
saying if they don't fix the same problem for 6
Yeah.
months,
And that's basically
not
what I
if you
said in my
go
comment, right.
on the day one and they have
Right,
7 violations, then they're shut down.
It,
Right,
it's
it's the
receives
same-
5 or more citations
Right.
for the same violation.
And that's basically what I said.
Would we
That's
be
not
doing
what it
more
says.
than that?
Well, that's
But no, that's
I
not
guess.
what my comments were.
Oh,
Well, I guess that's my question is that even
Is that something that happened?
is that yeah? Do we have that many citations for one thing within
well, it's a
the
new
6 months?
system, so
It's a new
hard to
system,
know.
but I very
I mean-
rarely have the same.
I asked for clarification.
Maybe if it's the same citation, it's 3 citations for the same thing within a 6-month period. I mean,
We're giving
I'm
them
trying
appearance
to.
tickets right off the bat. Would
Yes.
we be giving a second appearance ticket?
I'm just trying to think about like in terms of the follow up
If-
and the
if-
citations, what is it going to be? You know.
If you do that, Jason, then we should have, it should be, I don't know if, but in other sections of our code, it will say, so much for the first offense, so much for the second. So if we are talking, Ariana, about a repeated violation, if I go before the same judge, which is what I do, and they see them twice, then maybe it would mean, at a second offense, an addition, have a different fine.
Pay attention. We should all probably. One of the things eventually is we need some kind of a handbook for the village board, such as 129.14E. Sally, this actually may be more flexible than just putting in revocations. In addition to the above provided penalties, the Board of Trustees may maintain an action or proceeding in the name of the village in a court of competent jurisdiction to compel compliance with or to restrain by injunction the violation of this chapter.
Is
So
that
we-
new?
No, that's status quo.
Oh.
Yeah, the village code is littered with, and the state law is littered with all these other things a board of trustees can do. So we can basically, if Kathy gets the same problem a couple of times, she can take them to court, but we can also bring suit as, bring
Under
the whole
what
village.
grounds?
I guess we'd have to talk to a lawyer, I don't know.
I think so.
To compel,
Because if
how would
the
you
building
injunctions?
if the building inspector does not agree,
How about restraining orders to prevent them from having tenants until the thing is
if
fixed?
the building inspector does not agree,
Well, if
What
there's a
happens?
code violation, you're not gonna get a building inspector not agreeing. If
Right.
there's code violations and those are not being fixed, there's no way I will not agree.
I'm not talking about you. 'Cause
Then
Okay.
you and I aren't always going to be here.
We're
the-
not?
If
No,
a building,
I hate to delude you.
if a building inspector sees code violations and says that they're not, then they need to be fired. Is what happens to the building inspector.
Well, I agree.
Malfeasance. No, malfeasance. What's the other
Yeah,
one?
it's misfeasance.
Misfeasance. Not doing your job well.
Malfeasance is where you get the money, honey.
Malfeasance. Oh, the well, I guess what I was thinking was, because this is a workshop, and this, while important, is not something that's so urgent we need to vote
Oh,
on
I
tonight.
think we're almost done it.
Well, I was just going to put it on next week's agenda for any action, but
Can we make a few revisions and
That's
see
what I was
it
thinking.
looks like?
Brian,
Yeah.
Brian, you had some concerns that you said were gonna be more lengthy?
Oh yeah, I mean, as it is, I wouldn't be able to vote on this. I mean, I mean,
Well, is next week too soon to put this back before the board, or should I wait for the meeting after
Can you
that?
get any of your concerns, so, you know?
I mean, we can work on, like, you know, I would be, now that I've had an explanation,
Mhm.
I can go back and, you know, note out some things. I think that this was a very fruitful discussion.
Yeah.
I might like to have maybe a more structured one next time. I don't know if everyone. Yeah, I mean, before I mean, I think it needs reworking before.
Would you do
I'd be willing to.
us all a favor
Uh,
and get your comments in
tomorrow. What? I mean, before.
about what areas you question? Because, I mean, I've been through this.
Yeah.
And most of the corrections Kathy and Jason, I mean, you know, we talked about, and I'm ready to go with it. You're not.
Nah.
So, could you get your comments to him?
Yeah, but you know.
Probably not by.
Not by tomorrow at noon, yeah.
So it won't be on next week. It'll be on the meeting after. So.
Yeah.
I mean, how about this? If you have any comments or edits or suggestions, if you could email them to me by, like, I don't know, close of business Friday. That way I'll have all, you know, until next week, and I can even put in the, you know, alternate if people have differing views, so we can have everything in one document. Yeah.
I have some comments right now.
Okay, sure.
I've been a landlord, I've been a tenant, several of each during my life. I think that this proposal is too aggressive. I think we have some landlords that are problems, and I know we have some tenants that are problems. And I think we should try to address this, but I think this is overreaching, and I don't think this is, a lot of these things aren't appropriate, so I'll make comments on the thing that I do have. First of all, in the whereas, there's a part that says is to protect the public morals.
Yeah.
Are
What
we allowed to do that? I
It's
don't
actually
think
in
so.
the state law, yeah.
Well,
In
I
powers
was
and
going to
duties.
suggest taking out
Where does
all
it
the
say that?
whereases.
For fifth whereas. And then in the same whereas, it talks about fixing certain responsibilities that lists people and occupants, but I didn't see much in the way of responsibilities of occupants here.
That's because this law has nothing to do with the
Well,
tenants.
then we shouldn't put it in there, should
He's
we?
right.
But this is, I didn't write that. That's in the current village code.
I'm just commenting on what's before me.
Alright.
And then there's a statement that says delinquent property maintenance is not only a risk to public health, safety, and welfare, but a direct risk to 3/4 of the village population. Well, that would mean if there were delinquent property problems on all of the properties, then it would be for 3/4 of the population, not the small fraction that it is of that number. I also think that when they talk about that there's economic disincentive to maintain your properties, I don't think that's accurate, because if if you have a nice property, people are going to want to rent it, and they'll pay more rent for it. Unless if it's a junky property, they won't do that.
Ariana just said they would.
I disagree with that.
Okay,
But okay.
The market's too flooded here. There's not enough
that's
tenant
fine.
mobility.
And also, if you're going to add all of these things to these layers, it's going to obviously add a lot more to the rent, because all of the compliance things are going to be put on to the tenants.
Of course.
What more are we adding?
Well, the time and the compliance and all of these things.
That's
I can't
what
have.
already there.
That's what they have to be doing right now.
Okay,
It's
well,
all
we'll
status
see.
quo.
And then, can I
Yes.
finish?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've waited patiently to hear the other remarks, of many of which that I totally disagree with. So I'm going to have my say, if you don't mind.
Please do.
And it says here that our code now has proven to be an ineffective means to ensure uniform, fair, and impartial compliance. Well, the code is there, we're just not enforcing it properly. So I don't think you can really say that. I totally disagree with the displaced tenant. You on the one hand, you want to say, well, the landlord's going to have a lease, and they're going to have all these things, and if the tenant destroys the place, then that's the landlord's problem. And that's not a realistic way to look at it. I know there's problems with the landlords, some of them, and you have to deal with it, but it's a very one-sided document, and I've been on both sides of this, and I know you don't agree with that, all of you, but that's my opinion. When it talks about rental property, it exempts certain things, one of which is a hostel, which I don't understand. What's the difference between a hostel and an apartment? We got one hostel, it's got 100 rooms or something, I mean.
The hostel's inspected.
Rental property does not include or hostel, it says here.
Alright, hostel
And
is
the
inspected.
hostel also rents rooms on a more permanent
Right.
basis as
Yes,
well.
and they are inspected annually.
Okay, I'm just
I know.
reading what I've got here.
I'm not second guessing. I'm saying in favor. Of
Also, what's wrong with registering the property and then if it changes, change your registration as opposed to registering every year? I understand you're going to pay some money and have it inspected, that's fine, but going through the whole register, once you've done it, why not just have it that you, if there's a change, then you make them change it at the building inspector's
Are you
office?
saying just go for a renewal? Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying, just for a renewal?
I thought that's what you said you were doing.
That is what we're doing.
That's what we do now.
That's what they're doing, Stuart.
The renewals.
Shall register the property each year with the building inspector. I'm just
Yes.
reading what's
Okay.
before me.
So maybe that language is, but it is,
And
it
then-
is
Register.
mentioned backwards.
And then you're gonna have this checklist, and you're gonna say, that you sign a paper that says, commit to ensuring the property is in compliance with all regulations at all times. Now, I'll give you an example. I had a tenant one time, had all the smoke detectors and everything hooked up. They had a party, they unhooked it, they put a smoke machine in there, and they had a big party, and then, I have no idea they're doing this. If the
Right.
building inspector come there, that's $750, and if I didn't find it for 3 days, it's, $2,500. What, I mean, it's overreaching, I'm sorry.
You see, you're making that the current code is overreaching, not the new code.
Well, if you're gonna charge $750,
The building
dollars,
inspector can't come on your property without your permission.
Right.
So how do you explain the parties to it?
well, you can't have a complaint from, somebody to
She
bring
has
on.
to have your permission to go on the property.
Or the permission of the tenant.
Yeah.
If there's a
Or the
problem.
permission
Somebody-
of the tenant, there
Right.
you go.
You think the tenant's gonna call her and say, hey, I unhooked the smoke detectors
they-
because I'm having a smoke machine.
If they are not in compliance with other things and they want to give the landlord a rough time, then yes, they would. And
And
I'm
we do have
not
that.
taking the landlord position all the time, I'm just saying this is, to me, a very one-sided document. And I really don't think we should get into giving a license. You register the property, all right, you give them the rules, this is how it is, fine. In one place, you're giving them 30 days notice to correct it, which I think is fair. And if they have to, if you want to put another fee because the building inspector has to come back and check that you did it, that's fair. But, another place, you say, well, you come in, if there's violations, there's 10 violations, you're in court right now on all of them. I don't think that's due process.
How so? When you get pulled over and if you have 10 things wrong with your car, don't you get 10 tickets and go to court right away? But from the
I
cop?
don't think that's the same situation.
How so?
Okay, well,
I'm asking
my
how is
opinion.
it different? How is it categorically different that it should have a longer?
I think Jason.
I mean, because this is the central part of
Yeah,
this
I
is the
asked
central
due
part of
pro- I
the
asked due
law.
process. I asked the due process question.
Well, no, this
remember?
is the central part of the law that we've gone to.
Right.
Because also, yes, we should have a license because if we just 2 months ago passed a law requiring people to have a license to keep free chickens, we should probably,
We
a
had
house of all
licenses
this, and we
before.
have licenses now.
Well, I
But
mean,
the
basically,
due
we're
process
creating
is-
all kinds of laws, which I called out there with the building inspector, of which we have
We're
one.
not creating new laws to send the building inspector for anything.
Oh, no? You
What
don't
law?
think the building inspector's gonna be involved with all of this, with these checklists and?
What is the building inspector required to enforce under this new law that she's not right today?
It's not happening today, though. You're putting different emphasis on what your building inspector has to do with the long checklist that I saw
By
the first
law,
time
she
around.
must address all of these, and we haven't the
Well-
tools to do it, and that's what this was for. So I'm not sure what the.
Well,
I'm trying to
saying
find the
it-
objection.
She says she does it already, Stuart.
Yeah, but I don't think that this
The
law
checklist
is
is
going
good.
to make the checklist happen. I think the checklist, on its own, could
Yeah.
happen.
That's
And it should be
Yeah.
happening.
But and that's
So
and
that's an issue.
specifically, none of this is new law. So this is all she's
Right.
already supposed to be doing everything on this list. So there's no new regulations. The license is something required for things much more minor than renting property.
But
And the due process was the core point, though.
well, you have all these laws and things that the building inspector is supposed to do. I mean, somebody is not supposed to be able to bring their animal and have excrement on my lawn. That's a law. They do it all the time.
It's not me.
No, but I'm saying what's the building inspector supposed to go out and do that? But I mean, so we have these laws, and so now we're adding to the burden. And I think that there are legitimate things here, but I think, this is too much. I think
Well, the due process is important. Why? I'd really like to understand that better. Because Kathy had this concern, and what we were really talking about was, and it comes down to the getting pulled over model.
Right.
Because what we do now is the equivalent of you're a cop, you pull me over, I got all this stuff wrong with my car, and instead of giving me a ticket, you say, all right, well, meet me back here in 30 days, and get it taken care of, and if you want to cancel it and put it off,
I don't know if that's an analogous situation, and I think research may show that that's not true. But I mean, I'm not prepared to answer that tonight, but I think that, first of all, doesn't seem right to me. Okay, well.
Because we did discuss
it.
You
said it's not a violation of due process.
Right.
But I don't know if you mean legally formally or just as a way to describe things.
Both. Okay. I also don't think that if someone's in compliance with their property, if you find them and all these things you're doing to them, to just say, they can't rent their property. I don't know if you have the right to do that. And I would think that's a dangerous thing to pass liability wise. I don't like it anyway, but I just think that's a problem.
Liability for whom?
For the village, when you tell
No.
people, okay, all right.
You got I would say you have a greater liability allowing some of the properties that are being rented right now.
Yes, but you're coming up with a system to solve that, and you're going to solve it. But that's this.
That's right. That's why.
This is
recommending this.
Okay, this is overkill.
You're not getting it. You're
Well, in
saying
fact,
it's
you are.
not fit.
Which is the
That's
same.
the
Which is the same thing. And
Well,
you're
my
telling
neighbors-
people this is America, and there are certain things in the United States that you can do, and I think overreaching may be an accurate term to say that in 5 violations,
Well, I don't
Which
know how
may
many
not-
there should be.
well,
Wait, can we've already been down this road and all
Right.
over, and Stuart was actually in the middle, I think.
I'm
He
sorry,
talked
yeah,
about
I didn't mean to.
I'd like to
Yeah,
mention
and
that.
I also don't think you have a realistic idea on what many of the landlords are making for net profit on these
Yes.
properties. I think you're really out of line. So, you're taking in $600 a month and you're putting that all in the bank.
I was clear that was gross now.
I think, well, it is a gross number in several ways, but I think that if you really ran the figures, you'd see that they're not making out that well. Some of them. Now, some of them are causing a problem, and that's what should be addressed. But we're like giving everybody pain for what the few people. Not that you shouldn't enforce the code and get better at it. I think we
I think
should.
that's exactly what you're saying we shouldn't do, Stuart. That's what it sounds like. I'm trying to understand if I'm misunderstanding. You seem to be, because you keep coming back to the same
Okay.
point that it's we have all these new regulations and we can't let them like it seems
All right,
cartoonish, but it's not unreasonable for us to expect landlords to obey the laws that the village board has passed and the state legislature has passed.
Let me ask this: that every one of us, forget if you're renting the property, you're supposed to have your home up to code. So we're going to have all the landlords inspected. So why don't we just inspect everybody to make sure they're up to code? Maybe
That'd be
once
fine
a year,
with me.
everybody in town. Okay, but I mean, to be consistent, you'd have to do that
Because we have
because you care about the safety of everybody in the town and that they follow the state codes and all that. So I mean.
Stuart, that's a straw man, and I'm really getting tired of them. Because, look, the whole point is, the only person who can be cited for a code violation of the property maintenance code is the property owner. You cannot cite a tenant. So what we have is buildings that are not up to code, populated by people who have no resources or capacity to get them up to code, and so someone has to with someone's private home. You're both the tenant and the property owner. You've got all the cards. It's your responsibility. You took on that responsibility when you bought the house and all this, that, and the other. And it's the only person who gets hurt by your, not your personally, the only person who your incompetence or failure or greed would hurt is you. As opposed to if you have an incompetent or greedy or whatever landlord, the people that are hurting are those least able to protect themselves. And that's why you need laws like this.
Well, I think it's overreaching.
But you didn't. It's not particular provisions or overreaching, but the whole thing. And most of your examples were from things I didn't change and are actually in the code book now. So I'm wondering if there's a bigger issue at stake in your mind than just this revision of this one code. I mean, is it a broader? Are there other things we're going to have to take on?
I don't think you're. One of the basic things, I don't think you're taking into account the actions of the tenants in your analysis here.
I also don't take into account the actions of lots of things, but if it's a narrow law.
Well,
if you want to write a law that regulates tenants, then I think that's a different story.
I don't want to, and when I wrote you my email, and I said sarcastically that why don't we just, do things to bad tenants and so forth. But the point was that you're looking at this from the landlord's, anti-landlord's point of view only, and there are valid criticisms and they should be corrected, but that's not the whole picture.
I'm not anti-landlord, Stuart. I'm anti.
I understand. Yes, you're for force the code and all of that, but as the building inspector has said, the tenants do bad things to the property too. And you say, well, you have a lease, you take them to court, you have a $500.
But you haven't proposed any changes in 2 months.
Let's look at this
I'd like a positive contribution. If there's
my positive contribution is that I think half of these things should come out of there. That's my opinion, and I think the fines are too high, and are not not necessary to have people comply. And if you got somebody, you write in there, if there's some extremely negligent landlords, then you deal with them. But I mean, just hitting everybody with a hammer here.
I've been waiting patiently. Do you mind? Okay. I'm sorry. Kathy, the way the law is written now, can you enforce violations?
Yes.
What would be the enforcement? A fine, correct?
Order to remedy.
Order to remedy.
Time to come into compliance.
Okay.
Comes into compliance, violation is cleared. If the violation still exists, you go to court.
You go to court, and that'll serve them with a fine.
And that'll serve them with a fine. However, that does not mean that I get compliance, because there have been a number of times that I have another order to remedy ready at court, so after they pay the fine and the violation has not been lifted, I hand them another order to remedy, which starts the clock and brings us back to court after 10 days.
Because some landlords will just eat the fine and keep going?
Exactly, that's why the fines need to be raised.
So we have this drastically revised
I don't think it's
code.
that drastically revised. I think that there's been a lot more put into it.
There are parts of it that I would say,
a lot of it was taken from what we have, and I think it's been updated. But go ahead.
I think like displacing people is kind of extreme. There are parts of it that are extreme. We can agree and disagree. But
and like I said in the email, a lot of stuff is best I can come up with. If it doesn't work, I don't care. Scrap that provision. We'll figure something else out.
But point being, so really we could just raise the fines, but that would enable you to do a better job, and then you have your checklist. So now we have some evidence and some sort of proof. Am I missing something? Is there something? Is this all extremely necessary to do, or is it that simple? To raise the fines, is that going to enable you to bring people into compliance more?
I don't think just raising the fines is going to do it. I think we need to modify our ordinance, because when this ordinance was written, it was written a number of years ago, and there have been significant changes.
Okay.
And I think that we owe it to our community to incorporate an ordinance that takes those changes into consideration, and so that we can protect.
And the big one is, of course, owner-occupied versus.
Right.
So the displacing thing, you're okay with that? You're not okay with that?
It's not that
None of us are really okay with it. It sounded like trying to basically what do you invent to deal with the problem landlord who is willing to eat fine after fine after fine and keep the house out of
And
compliance.
that's the truth.
What do we do? I mean, and
Yeah,
that's what
that's
we're
the
trying
truth.
to invent tools here, and
You
this
know,
one is kind of.
I'm against the idea of displacement on in many ways, but
But I mean,
I think of a particular case that I knew of where, and luckily this house was recently bought and renovated, gutted, but this house had black mold, really, really serious black mold, and I don't know what these students knew about what to do regarding it. But this kid went to a doctor, didn't really know what was wrong with him. They put it together because he told them that he was like seeing things, having hallucinations, which was a cause of black mold. But so a situation like that's a situation where you don't want that person living in that house. But so I think if there's very significant health reasons
Right, people
why
have
someone
running
should be
water.
displaced, that's a different thing.
That's different.
But if it's like, there are no screens in the windows, and I mean, I don't know. There's like levels of citations where I think like the person needs to be out of the house, or where I think we need to
we
just
aren't
make sure
even-
we're enforcing things.
We aren't even that far along in the discussion of strategizing a list of, serious, okay? The arguments that I've been hearing are, and I don't quite get it, I mean, there are truth in lending laws, there are the lemon laws in New York State, there are the Consumer Protection Bureau. Those are all to help people who could be at the mercy of a corporation.
No, yeah.
Take it down to the village and to tenants. Now, I'm sorry, but I think most people deserve decent housing. And if I'm paying the kind of rents that I understand are being collected in New Paltz, they might have to be, better housing than even I live in, because the rents are incredible. Now, the only point, and my major concern is, you charge those rents, a supply and demand, okay, you have the demand, you can supply it, but now I have the right to say it has to be decent. That's all I'm saying. And I'm not gonna argue whether it's an owner-occupied or a non-owner. I think if you are making money on somebody else, yes, I can tell you the rules. That's all.
That last is a really good way to put it.
Yeah,
I mean,
I would agree with that.
But it's getting late, and we've still got a couple of things to deal with. Oh, almost 11. Do we want to take a break and come back and discuss fracking? Or
No, because I feel ill, and I want to have this. I just want to do this. I just want to keep going.
Could we time out for 5 seconds for the clerk to go to the ladies' room?
Absolutely. If you need a break, Katie, of course.
It'll be 5 minutes anyway.
We said we would.
All right.
I'm in favor of 5 minutes.